We've seen plenty of people cover Pokemon icebergs, lore and theories of the Pokemon world that dig so deep that most people aren't even aware they exist. But even those icebergs only scratch the surface of the largest mysteries and lore iceberg I have ever laid eyes on. It stretches from basic theories as to why Zygarde is an Alola and why Gary Oak has 10 badges, to explaining how Rei and Akari are actually Lucas and Dawn after completing the Pokedex, the connection between the Unown and Ultra Beasts, Champion Alder being the legendary hero of Hisui, all Pokedex Pokemon are imaginary, Deoxys and Staryu are being related, and so much more! So as someone who has studied Pokemon ecology, lore, and history as if it were a college course, I have done the legwork for you to bring the answers to this massive, ultimate Pokemon theory and mystery iceberg. Howdy there, I'm Krillin, and this is a Herculean task by all means, so much so that with over 300 entries to deep dive into, I am breaking this up into multiple parts. Aghast, truly, I understand, crazy. But there's just that much and that much to talk about. So as we go through, I will say that I will be breaking this iceberg down, starting with the most known theories and diving deeper into the unknown. No, not that one. As they get more and more complicated. I won't spend ridiculous amounts of time on every single one, just the ones that I think deserve it, the ones that pique my interest, and the ones that I can give you my thoughts on and bring you answers to. Although, if I can't give you a definitive answer here, because there's too much information or too many theories that go into it, then there's the chance that I might make that into its own multi-hour video to dig into. If you want to follow along, I will have this iceberg linked into the description of this video. Just be prepared to zoom in because I'm not joking when I say it's ridiculously long. So let's start with the first section. The tip of the iceberg has a lot of theories that are confirmed already or are widely known, typically. The first of which is actually the Pokemon War. We know there are a number of Pokemon Wars, one of them being the Great Pokemon War itself that occurred in Kalos and is hinted to be a worldwide battle, considering the sheer scale of the ultimate weapon created by AZ and the Pokemon that were harmed. We also know of other wars, such as the one that Lieutenant Surge was in. Despite not being a named war, there are a lot of different theories as to what war he could have been in. And the war that occurred on the Great Moor of Icarus, which involved the conflict between two opposite parties, but had endangered a lot of Pokemon before the Swords of Justice came in, cleaned up, and saved the day. This, of course, shocks a lot of people that are more new to the franchise. Pokemon being blatantly used for war, being mistreated, and overall being used as weapons is something that people don't initially think about, and you just, otherwise see these creatures as cute little monsters to play with. So I will say though, I'm not going to deep dive into this concept because I already have a video detailing the timeline and effects on history of the Great War alongside a number of these other wars that I mentioned and how everything is involved with each other. So you could go watch that video if you really would like. Ho-Oh made Ash immortal. Ho-Oh is the being representing the mythical phoenix. In addition, Ho-Oh had revived our legendary beasts from their fiery demise within the Bell Tower. The theory, though, likes to dig into the idea that since it is stated, the rare few who bear witness to Ho-Oh are promised eternal happiness. Ash had actually seen our legendary phoenix early on in his story, actually even seeing it before it was officially shown in the games through the next generation that had yet to come out. So of course this created a massive spur in the community. What's that Pokemon? What is it doing there? Is it really a Pokemon? And so fledgling theorists and writers way back then just started popping off. After all, Ash, in the end, especially as information on Ho-Oh came out and all the theories went wild, Ash just wanted to become the best there ever was. To catch them all was his real test, to train them is his cause. You get it, I get it. In all seriousness, he does wish to be the best Pokemon master. Ho-Oh grants eternal happiness, and as such, how could you be the best there ever was when there are constantly new Pokemon being created, new trainers entering the scene, entire regions of people who have existed without your knowledge? Well, you travel the world. You live an eternal life where you lose and you learn. And Ash only ever really visibly ages once. And you continue doing these things. You lose and you win. You find your balance over and over and over again until one day you face the literal toughest challenge there ever was. A challenge, an obstacle that would never exist in history ever again. This could be Team Rocket, Ghetsis and his attempt to revive the original dragon, even Ultra Necrozma itself. All of which already being insane things to actually overcome. when you combine them, you start getting further and further into the impossible. When will these things ever happen again? Let alone, when will one person ever encounter all of these things ever again? Ash is there to put an end to it every single time with the people that he travels with up until he became champion. And now he's not the main character anymore. Which I'm not gonna lie. When I first, wrote that information out and kind of sat with it, it kind of hit me in a spot I wasn't expecting. A really soft spot. I never really actually grew up watching the anime, but Pokemon had been there all this time, and Ash had always been there. And who knows, maybe it's like the ending of Adventure Time. We may not be there following his story anymore, but he's out there somewhere doing his thing, traveling around the world, meeting more people, meeting new Pokemon, so on and so forth, and doing his best. So until he truly does become the best permanently, the theory basically holds that he will not age, or I guess he does age, but he will stay immortal otherwise because of his wish to become the best, and Ho-Oh blessing Ash with its presence. The Marvelous Bridge Girl. This is actually the first one that I had to research, and it turns out there's a girl on Marvelous Bridge in Unova that when you approach her, she flat out just disappears. Even another citizen nearby comments on this, saying, Huh? Did she just disappear? Then there is an old lady in the gate of the bridge farthest from Nimbasa that tells you about a girl who used to play around there with her Abra before the bridge was built. In the sequels of Black and White, the girl will also appear in the strange house where she will refer to Abra and the bridge before telling the player to return the lunar ring there, which will trigger a battle with Cresselia. So of course she's a deceased girl. The interesting part though is that Cresselia is not summoned by the lunar wing, the feather. It's just an item that's supposed to be used to awaken someone from Darkrai's endless nightmare, but it is given by Cresselia. This could mean what exactly you'd think right off the bat, and that is for the dark theory to be the truth. The girl could be trapped in a nightmare of sorts. Maybe something happened to her and her Abra, but I would like to think it's a little bit more adjacent to that rather than some horrible tragedy of murder or anything. No, what if her little nightmare is literally just the fact that the bridge was placed in her childhood play spot rather than it being something super dark? After all, it is a little heartbreaking when you are a child to see your playground removed. And while yes, that is very childish, we are talking about the mindset of a child within a children's game, making it a very sad instance within their lives that, I don't want to call it traumatic, but, it kind of hits a lot harder when you're little. Alternatively, it would be really fun to think of her as an emissary of Cresselia, an individual who dreams on and remembers what the land was like before the bridge, being able to visit the time when it was just a playground or a place for her to play with her Abra, thus knowing about the lunar wing and able to give us instructions. Now, as we go along, I would love to see what people think of these ideas and theories. I will continue to give concrete evidence when available as we go along, giving my own thoughts and theories to it when we don't have definitive answers as well. And if you're enjoying this so far, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe, share the channel around, and if you can, become a member for as little as $3 a month. It gives you a couple of perks, emotes, seeing behind the scenes content, some polls or posts that nobody else gets to see on YouTube, and a role in Discord, so join the Discord community as well. And I've started actually shouting out every single member name at the end of my videos, no matter how many of you there are. So, with that though, once again, thank you so much for watching, and on with the video. Butterfree and Venomoth Sprite switched. This one is real simple. Their designs are incredibly similar in the end, but when we compare in depth bug types across the board, there are similar concepts between many of them anyway. Big round eyes in the first form, cocoon in the second form, wings in the third form. Even if we look at the code of the Pokemon, they are incredibly far removed. I only know this because of a ridiculously in-depth comparison done by a Reddit user known as Invert Posting, and I mean, it is paragraphs of arguments against this theory. Though I have heard this theory so many times myself that I'm 100% ready for it to die in the past. To be nice, it is important to understand that some theories are here though just for the fun of it. Campfire stories you just tell to other people. You know it's not true, but it's plausible enough that you can run with it and make someone just kind of go, huh? So that way you can prep them for the next story and let yourself just have fun as you dive into the next theory, into the next mystery, into the next story. So yes, if I didn't make that clear, their sprites were not switched. They just have very similar eyes and everything like that. This is an old theory. Ditto are failed Mew clones. I have talked about this one so much that I know it by heart without even having to need a script, okay? So, Ditto, Mew. Both pink, their shinies are blue. They could both actually transform because guess what? Anyone who says Zoroark transforms into other Pokemon, they don't. They just take on a hallucinatory disguise, and if you are Hisui and Zoroark, you can make those hallucinations actually have physical power, but you are not transforming into them. No, Mew and Ditto flat out fully transform into other Pokemon. That was the first tie-in between the two. In addition, when we look at them, we know that Mewtwo is being created in the burned mansion that is on Cinnabar Island with Blaine and Dr. Fuji. Now, when we look into the basement of Cinnabar Island, that's where we start to find where things have changed over the years. Even in Fire Red and Leaf Green, you weren't finding any chambers that Mewtwo was being held in, assumedly. And, on top of that, the only time Ditto had a spawn rate was starting in Pokemon Yellow. Over the years, this theory may have actually developed into something much larger, because in the modern games, we now have that chamber sitting in the basement. We now have a 10% Ditto spawn rate, depending on which game you play. I believe it's 10% in Fire Red Leaf Green, and I believe it's 1% in Let's Go Pikachu Eevee. I just recently looked at it, and I'm too lazy to go back. But, nevertheless, they play into it now. They play into these ideas of maybe it is a failed clone. Maybe Ditto was supposed to be Mew. And that always makes it a little interesting that we as our audience can actually influence what has happened throughout the story and the games. People always think about the extinct Lapras situation as well. That's always a cute one. Blue's Raticate died. Another classic that is seemingly true on the surface. After a battle on the SS and with Blue, he no longer has Raticate on his team. In fact, one of the next times that we do see him is at Lavender Tower within Lavender Town, or the Pokemon Tower, however you really want to call it. This hints at the idea that after the battle, his Raticate was in critical condition and did not receive the care it needed in time, passing away on the ship. Problem though, the ship never left until after our battle. Like, we literally battle him, go rub the back of the sea captain because he gets a little sick sometimes, and then we step off the ship. Meaning he could have just left at any time. And while we use the bed to heal up our Pokemon in the game, we could also assume that a well-renowned individual, such as Blue, who has been shown to be intelligent and capable, would have been able to actually tend to his own Pokemon. It's a fun little edgy theory all in all, but Blue is a very confident trainer, likely realizing that having a Raticate amongst his team throws off its balance and that he needed to put it away. That Raticate is likely sitting snugly with Professor Oak as we speak, and as for why he visited the tower, in the manga it's actually shown after he speaks to the Mr. Fuji of the manga version that he doesn't believe that ghosts exist. Lavender Tower was said to, or the Pokemon Tower, was said to have a bunch of ghosts in it, and everyone stays away from it. He's like, I'm going to disprove their existence and take care of whatever issue is actually there, and he runs off. Not to bury any Pokemon. So, pretty much debunked, but it's an old, classic, edgy theory that's just fun to throw around. Let's move on. Game timelines. This becomes one of the biggest messes of Pokemon. The timelines of the Pokemon world are split and constantly diverging, with a multiverse of different events occurring, and once Pokemon Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon came out, it was basically confirmed that multiverses existed and we could go between them. The biggest split is really just because of the Mega and non-Mega timeline. And we kind of know this because names of places change, new places come into existence, and entire mass events occur while old known events are adjusted and changed, or otherwise still left completely unchanged. And honestly, it isn't just that these are new games with new events to freshen things up. Things are just similar enough with history unraveling into the same mass storylines, but with just small changes that then become much larger ones. Real butterfly effect going on here. Rayquaza being the original Mega Evolution, the explanation as to why Kyogre and Groudon sleep on the ground, or rather so close to the core of the earth, is so that way they can actually regain the origin energy and re-enter their original forms, and so much more. Even why Archie and Maxie are so desperate to accomplish their goals, to try and flood the earth or expand the land. They want to reach that original divine land, restore the earth to its original state, so that way things may start over. Now, all of that really honestly requires its own video, because it can get extremely messy if I do try to break everything down here and prove it. So you can hold me accountable and support the channel however you can, because the more support the channel gets, the sooner I get to new videos and multi-hour deep dives. Let's move on to the next one that actually is really fun as we talk about fallers. Fallers is a concept I actually recently became acquainted with. Humans that have passed through an ultra wormhole, such as Annabelle or the player character in Pokemon Sun and Moon, have something changed about them. These individuals being labeled as fallers by the international police. As a result of being exposed to large amounts of energy that pour from ultra wormholes, ultra beasts that find themselves in the same world as a faller will relentlessly hunt them down, seemingly smelling or sensing the residual energy and coming to the conclusion an ultra wormhole awaits to take them home. Because yes, the ultra beasts didn't actively come out into our world through the wormholes, they were accidentally just sucked up like a straw and sent over to us. This residual energy appears to be the same type of energy that Totem Pokemon and Z moves use, Z Power. Because of a faller's effective ability to lure Ultra Beasts, the international police utilizes fallers, typically without their knowledge, for this exact purpose. Examples of this include an unnamed female faller who accompanied Looker and Nanu on a mission 10 years ago, just before the duo had discovered Annabelle, and the player in Looker and Annabelle's missions to catch the Ultra Beast. These people are essentially in grave danger without a watchful eye and good protection, and then they're kind of thrown into the middle of danger anyway, unawares of themselves. But that also, again, is because they make great lures for Ultra Beasts. They're double-edged swords, essentially. The interesting part about the fallers is that we have individuals such as it stated, ourselves. There's Lusamine, her husband Mon. Literally anybody has gone through a wormhole. It's like a form of radiation you can't protect yourself from. This also makes it much easier to find out who is from our world or not, and who knows of Ultra Space. All you need is for, an Ultra Beast to sniff them out. So if you decide to explore the multiverse, you are essentially locked in to the idea that the multiverse will try to find you back forever. Team Rocket killed Marowak. Going back to Lavender Tower, this one is actually a no-brainer. Team Rocket was planning to sell Cubone skulls, Marowak got in the way, they took care of business, and the vengeful and protective spirit of Mother Marowak persisted in order to protect her child. This is actually a fairly proven theory. Without anything else to really say, it's kind of blatantly shown without directly bashing the skull in. Lumiose City Ghost Girl. Entering the second floor of a certain building in Lumiose City will cause the music to stop and the lights to flash, followed by a ghostly girl materializing behind the player and gliding towards the bottom of the screen in a frozen walking animation. She will then mutter, "No, you're not the one," before floating off screen and disappearing completely. Theories began to spread about her role. One hypothesis said that she would only talk to a player with a certain player or trainer ID, and another said that she was the key to unlock some ultra rare ghost type legendary. Currently, none of those prevailing theories have any real evidence to support them, and it appears that the Ghost Girl is merely an Easter egg, and an Easter egg that would give us the most fan art drawn character of all time, not just a Hex Maniac, the Hex Maniac. And I mean, I'm not allowed to argue. Everyone talks about wanting the goth mommy, but it complains when she decides that she wants to turn you into her next sacrifice. I will say that I do love that she is back in the Legends ZA promo images, assuming that that is actually her and not just a random Hex Maniac, and everyone lost their collective minds because, oh yeah, she's a little bit more mature now. Nevertheless, all joking aside, we can all hope that we get some good answers and more story with this one, as this all went from open and unsolvable code case to one that is just blasted open with dynamite thanks to the Legends ZA game. And again, I say it in every video, but when that comes out, I am no-lifing it. I am going to enjoy streaming that on this channel and creating a bunch of videos about the megas and whatever else we get in it. GS Ball. The GS Ball is a key item exclusive to Pokemon Crystal. It is a special and mysterious Pokeball whose design appears to be a reference to Pokemon Gold and Silver of Generation 2, as the ball has, well, the letters GS inscribed upon it and is colored both gold and silver. An NPC in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon even mentions the GS Ball, claiming that it stands for Great Smith's Ball or Gold Silver Ball. After obtaining the GS Ball, the player needs to take it to Kurtz, the person who creates Pokeballs, who will analyze it for a day. After it has been analyzed and returned, Ilex Forest becomes restless, and the player must place it on the Ilex Forest Shrine, which will summon a level 30 Celebi. This ain't a Muse Truck situation, this one's actually real. This ball was also seen in the original series of the anime and then in the Johto series. In an interview with Masamitsu Hidaka in 2008, it was explained that the GS Ball was originally going to contain a Celebi that was going to be the star of a large arc of the Johto saga. However, it was decided that Celebi would be the star of the 4th movie instead, so the story arc was viewed as redundant and shelved. The ball was left with Kurt with the hopes that viewers would eventually forget about it, but you know, of course people don't. This concept would later be recycled with Meloetta instead during the Pokemon the series Black and White. This actually would all make perfect sense and roll right back around to the idea that the ball would only be open at the right time because, you know, Celebi, time traveler baby. And with Celebi being the Pokemon within it and the story of that 4th movie, we would have discovered young Oak, his inspiration and beginning portion of his journey into becoming a Pokemon professor even, assuming that's where, you know, they would have kept the story consistent between the movie and the series. The only oddball for this, though, is that Professor Ivy was the one to have had the ball, to have discovered it, but I guess we can ignore that portion since plans diverged from the original idea anyway. I actually really love this one, and the entire idea of a ball not being allowed to open due to magical means. It's not the right time. A Pokemon refusing to come out rather than refusing to go into the ball. All as it waits for the right trainer to appear before it. Wally has asthma. I shouldn't laugh. I have asthma. I shouldn't laugh at this, but bear with me, because this one holds water. Wally of the Gen 3 games really is a sickly child by all means. Theories have gone around the world in terms of him being dead, him dying later on, him being incredibly sick in general with all the coughing he does, and the more we think about him having asthma, the more it actually makes sense. Thanks to the explanation from others. He goes off to live with his aunt and uncle in Verdanturf Town because, as his uncle tells the player, the wind direction makes it so smoke and ash from Mount Chimney doesn't reach the town as it does other areas in that part of Hoenn. Therefore, Verdanturf has the cleanest air in the entire region, which seems to be enough for him to become healthier, or at least long enough for him to go on a journey with Ralts, which is where we first see him. One could assume that the spider lilies at the portion of Victory Road doesn't symbolize the death of Wally himself as many expected when we see him and end up in that location, but rather the death of his asthma as he has become a lot healthier on his journey. I never put much thought into this originally, but I am actually in love with this little mini story and theory explanation that we have here. Big approval for me, and I would go more in depth into it, but that's really it. Those spider lilies were the biggest thing for them. Sickly child, spider lilies represent death in terms of writing, and so things were all over the place until we got this, and I'm happy with this. I'm happy with the idea that the death of illness. Sounds weird to say out loud. N is a Zoroark. This is another one I had to dig incredibly deep into when I covered the Great War timeline because, yes, N, Ghetsis, and so many more are actually incredibly involved with this, and more so than you might think. So allow me to break this idea down. N's ability is to be able to talk with Pokemon. He's always been able to do this, especially at a young age. As he grows up, he becomes very awkward. potentially neurodivergent. He speaks in the idea of truth, the ideas of mathematics, how the Ferris wheel is this perfect architectural concoction that takes immense amount of physics and so on and so forth to even be able to create in the first place. He is, by all means, potentially a genius, but only knows and understands fact and false. As such, it becomes hard for him to relate, to emote, to understand others, unless he can find logic behind it. There's also a visual cue of this being the fact that he basically wears a Rubik's Cube as a necklace, which is so strange. If that was a fully colored Rubik's Cube, I think he'd be made fun of. I love N, don't get me wrong, but I think N would get made fun of for wearing a fully colored Rubik's Cube as a neck little piece there. So his awkwardness and potential neurodivergence is one of the reasons why he might be a Zoroark, but it goes deeper. Because one of the biggest things that people used for this theory was the idea that Ghetsis called N a freak without a human heart. If you take that literally, then of course you would go along the lines of, well, he's a Pokemon then. Especially since he is often partnered with his Zoroark, even if it's not on his team. As we know, Zoroark can cast illusions and make itself look like people, so who's to say, especially with the hairstyle of N representing or being very closely tied to a Zoroark, that N isn't just a Zoroark in disguise. There are other parts and clues that lead into this, including when a Zoroark walks into the building, or rather the castle, and disappears, and being there instead, and the Zoroark not being on his team, in addition to scratch marks being in N's room, which is very sad and scary and a little creepy all the same with the music and all, but that's all because Ghetsis did not treat N correctly. Calling him a freak without a human heart is an insult. Ghetsis can't wrap his head around the idea of how people can talk to Pokemon. He's a freak. That's the idea. That is his mentality. And N is no more than a tool to be used by Ghetsis. He says so in his own plan. He says he, Ghetsis, could not be the great hero. He could not be the next hero that is required for Reshiram or Zekrom to appear. But when he finds out about N, he sits down and says he can be. He can absolutely be trained to become the next great hero of Unova. And then I could get my hands on those dragons. N was a means to an end. And honestly, only one of the 7 sages speaking to Ghetsis is able to really understand what's happening here and confer to us, indirectly, that N is human. In fact, he is said to have the same ability as the Great King. Now, we're going to dig into it very, very shallowly here because, again, great war video. Go check that one out. But the Great King actually refers back to AZ when we look at the Abyssal Ruins scriptures and the story that comes out of those. Not to say that N is a full-on direct child of AZ. I don't think, especially now that ZA is out, that we'd see, AZ abandoning N. But I would not be surprised if N was some sort of descendant of AZ. Another piece that kind of leads into the idea of N being a Zoroark is that we get memories of a Zoroark listening in on Team Plasma conversations. That one is a little bit weird because the argument is, how can you remember a memory such as that unless you were actually there? And I don't know. Honestly, my argument against that is the fact that N can speak to Pokemon. He understands them. We don't know how they speak. They don't quite speak telepathically, but at the same time, if there is a telepathic link to some degree, even if it is just being able to understand Pokemon, you can imagine what this scenario looked like. The other big piece is that at one point in time, humans and Pokemon are said to have been indistinguishable from each other at one point. So, they were 2 separate things that did exist, 2 separate creatures that existed in the world, but were indistinguishable. So it's not to say that it is impossible that N is a partial Zoroark, a child of a Zoroark, so on and so forth. It's a fun theory, but overall, it's not one that I personally subscribe to, but it would be pretty cool to see if it actually was true. On to the next one. Hydreigon hates Ghetsis. This one's actually fairly straightforward and honestly provable, despite the fact that this is just a bunch of numbers and code within the games, or even if you look at the anime, because of the fact that Hydreigon has the move Frustration. Now, Frustration is very much the opposite of Return, where instead of your Pokemon needing more compassion or friendliness towards you to do more damage, the more it dislikes you is the more damage it then results in. And Hydreigon having Frustration and being able to output some pretty nasty damage with it, the maximum amount, we can very much easily assume that Hydreigon was very much mistreated by Ghetsis in order to make it very powerful and be able to hit hard with that. Also, it probably shows that the rest of his Pokemon aren't treated very well at all because he doesn't care about Pokemon. He just doesn't. He's kind of a monster, wants to use them as tools and doesn't care about a single one of them. He's very much like the Madam Boss of Team Rocket, because even Giovanni loves Persian and some of his other Pokemon. Gamefreak leaks info. Lots of info gets leaked, and sometimes a company as big as Gamefreak knows that leaks happen all the time. I mean, you can't really prevent them from happening, especially when you get huge. There's too many people to keep tabs on, right? So, especially if people are trying to get in on your information. So what's the best way to ensure that hype is built up without having to do anything big yourself, subvert expectations, and ensure only the info you want leaked gets leaked? You do it yourself. Now, I doubt this one for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest ones being the Terra leak that did happen, because, oh god, the implications of that one, if that one was done on purpose, that's bad. That's really bad, unless they covered their ground. But again, that's not something I think that any company would do for that matter. You could, by all means, be like, oh yeah, let the information out on weird screenshots of the starters from a random magazine. Let people think what they want. Let them build up the hype. Let everything get stirred. Because really, when it comes to search engines, if you can get your name on multiple search engines, even if you're not posting on everything, then everything's gonna lead back to you and your main stuff. That's why people who have YouTube channels, like myself, who don't post on TikTok, who don't post on Instagram, and all these other things, will have a lot of accounts across the board. Not to say every account is me, but at the same time, if I want to capitalize and ensure I'm everywhere, no one can take it, or that, you know, the talk gets back around to me, that's why you do it. You take the name. And in this case, you throw the leaks out. Infinity Energy. So Infinity Energy itself is technically not bioenergy, but it is all at the same time, and this one gets a little bit tricky. So there is an infinite energy of bioenergy within Pokemon, which is their life force. When you look at places like C. Mauville or the Greater Mauville Project, which involved Watson, we start getting into the idea of, oh, that can be used to create infinity energy, which I believe was actually coined by places such as not Silphco. It was coined by Steven Stone, Hoenn, Devon Corporation. I got it. Took me a while. I have a script right here, and I pretty much decided to go completely against it. Either way, it exists within all Pokemon, the bioenergy. It can be turned into infinity energy, and it is, by all means, an abused power by many humans. It is a common concept at this point within Pokemon, thanks to Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. It was used in the Ultimate Weapon. It was used to recreate smaller Ultimate Weapons that were used to then capture Rayquaza for studying. The list goes on and on. We've kind of mentioned it a number of times already. Let's go. Mimikyu's true form. To oversimplify this, Mimikyu is a disguised creature that hates Pikachu while also wanting to be loved. So, it copies the most popular Pokemon within the world of Pokemon in order to receive that love. If you look at its true form though, you will fall incredibly ill and die. This is not an exaggeration. We even get to see this almost happen in the anime. So of course, everyone and their mothers wants to know what its true form actually is, and no, not just be satisfied with the black blob with purple eyes. I'm no different, considering it is, by all means, one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. Theories go all over the place, from saying how it's the pre-evolved form of Darkrai due to the similarities, how it could have been split from the Eternal Floette as both light and dark are created in balance, a form of eternal life, and a form of guaranteed death. Two sides of the same coin. So there's a lot going on here. We could also look into the idea that it is based off of inspirations such as the Boogle Naz, a Breton myth about a kind and gentle fairy spirit, fairy typing, whose horrifying ugliness causes it to be perpetually alone, very much like our Mimikyu here. The fact that, I'm not calling Mimikyu ugly, I'm sorry, my sweet baby child. The fact that Mimikyu's true appearance can kill may be a reference to Lovecraftian or Eldritch monsters. If any person were to see their true forms, they would either be driven insane or die. Also, its Japanese name can be broken down and in part have the word mystery within it, being a mystery as to what is truly underneath its cloak. Arguably, this Pokemon could literally just be the personification of jealousy, sadness, even some level of hatred, and that would follow the line of many of our other ghost Pokemon and how they came into existence through pure emotion. So, Mimikyu may very well be just a pure shadow, and if it were ever to be touched by light, like a vampire, or Ghastly for that matter, or a number of other ghost-type Pokemon, it would just fall to nothingness. Personally, I hope we never get more of an answer than seeing this black blob with a vaguely purple eye. You know, some things just need to stay a mystery. Let it stay that way. I think there's something special about things that can never be solved. Arceus's true form. Arceus, we know, is not the true form of Arceus. We've known this for a while now, and it was confirmed through Pokemon Legends Arceus itself. Thank you, Gamefreak, for answering something in that game. Now, when we look at Arceus, we now know that it is one of the 1,000 arms of the one true being. The one true being we might technically, some people say, get a glimpse of in the very beginning of the game when our character is looking at this eternal sun that is sitting at the very beginning of Pokemon Legends Arceus. We shield our eyes, we're blinded, and then Arceus appears before us. We know the one true being is that without a name, is incomprehensible to human beings or other Pokemon, and just overall has never shown itself. Now, some people might also believe that the beta form of Arceus, looking very similar of course, but being a pure light being with red ring eyes, or I think it's white ring eyes, I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head right now. Either way, might have or may be the one true Arceus, its true form. And from there, all the arms extend outward, giving us each of the Arceus that we actually know and love. It's less of a mystery at this point and more of the idea of, okay, what actually is the true form? That's the mystery that we have here. We know everything else. We understand how it works. We just do not know for sure what the true Arceus is, and that's again another mystery we may never actually be beholden to solve. Pokedex entries are incorrect. I have almost made a video on this, and I really incredibly am tempted to make a video on this. Tell me if that's something that you'd be interested in, honestly. It's one of those things where I'm like, every single day I'm looking at Pokedex entries, and I'm like, that makes no sense. Why? How would they know that Machamp with one arm can push a mountain? Who is sitting here allowing a Pokemon to push a mountain? I guess you don't get a choice. If it can push a mountain, imagine what it can do to your body, your skeletal frame. I guess you're not letting it. It is letting you live. Now, the theories behind this go into ideas such as, oh, because we fill out the Pokédex, not Professor Oak, but because we're grabbing the Pokemon, we're bringing them back, you know, maybe he does his own studies, of course, still, but because we are a child going around the world and researching Pokemon and battling them, we are technically writing the Pokédex. A child wrote the Pokédex within the games, which would make sense considering something such as strong as 10 adults, the smartest there is, smarter than any supercomputer, all these like very vague ideas. In addition to, most of the time when you get miles per hour, kilometers an hour measurements, most of them are that of like 30, 60, round numbers that can be related back to how fast a vehicle may move, giving you a child's frame of reference. Ultimately, these are children's games, but at the same time, they have had more detail in some Pokemon than others, And on top of that, there are legends and myths from people who didn't know better, such as those in Hisui, looking into Pokemon that would be seen as dangerous, are ghost types that might steal your soul, like Sableye, which was said that anytime that its gems on its eyes would flash, it would actually steal your soul. Well, that's not the case. We know that because it just wants gems. Also, take into account, Sableye likes to live within caves. So if you're caving, or you're going for gems yourself, and you're crawling through, maybe with a torch or a flashlight, what's the first thing you're gonna see when Sableye turns around? Not its body. It has a dark purple body which will blend in with the environment nicely. All of the gems will not. So you might see a numerous amount of gems upon its body, because they grow randomly according to whatever gems it eats, shine, and when it turns around, you see this big grin with teeth, very much like Stitch grin, with those perfect gem eyes that then glisten in front of you. I would be terrified. I don't care who you are. If you see a monster, you are going to get scared because you don't know if you can punch it. I'm sorry. I would swing and then run. I'm not playing around and finding out if or what my impact did. I swing and then I run. I fight, then I flight. There is no in between. There is no one or the other, both. So, again, going back to the Pokédex though, we get this idea of history being written and rewritten again, almost like it is a scientific article that is being improved upon as the years go along. Think of what people used to think of diseases in real life. People used to think that women can't be in cars or their ovaries would shoot out of their body due to the force. So it's not out of the question to think that the Pokédex is incorrect at times. It's okay. It's science. It's proven correct until the next thing comes along and it is actually found out to be even more correct or something along those lines with peer review. And then, of course, it might depend on the universe that you exist within, because in one universe, Beautifly is oddly incredibly aggressive and will stab you if you dare mess with it while it's getting its morning drink of nectar. So, yeah, the Pokédex is a little incorrect or a little weird at times, and that would be a very fun video to cover if you would like to see that. Underneath Diglett. Everyone wants to know what's under the mole. No one wants to know how is the mole. Ultimately, though, it digs around, it always has the dirt around it, it carries that dirt around it wherever it goes, oddly enough, and in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, we of course have the ultimate classic, I can feel it touching my feet moment. Look, it's a mole, it assumedly has legs, but art can go wild, because we have never seen 100% official art, or at least I haven't, of Underneath Diglett. Is it one part of a masked creature secretly? Is it built like a bodybuilder? We'll never know for sure. Sam is Professor Oak. Samuel Oak. Celebi movie baby. It's basically proven he is young Oak, which we can get a little bit of proof here directly from the movie, as later, after the call, Misty wondered how Professor Oak knew Sam's name when they hadn't even mentioned it to him. At his lab, we see Professor Oak was seen looking at a faded version of Sam's sketchbook. And so, we can very easily show that Sam is Samuel Oak and not Samson Oak or any other Sam Oak that may exist within the Oak family. It's a great big tree, a great big family tree. We're moving on. Anime Cyrus's fate. Cyrus, obsessed with a new world all to his own, barred his commanders from following him, fearing they would corrupt it. As a wormhole closes, Cyrus steps through, being lost along with his new world as Dialga and Palkia attack and destroy it in their rage after being freed from the red chain. That is really bad. Like, that is potentially worse than death, and let me explain why. These two, separately or together, can either create or destroy entire universes together. This basically theorizes, or I will theorize, that Cyrus didn't necessarily die. He was erased from existence. Within the universe, he wanted that would not have spirits. Now, spirits could be the human will, meaning that it could be a world without Azelf. Maybe it could be a world without emotion. It'd be a world with logic, direct understanding, something that would theoretically not ruin the world. I would be not allowed in that world. I'm a very emotional individual, but I'm also very logical, and Cyrus is all logic. If there is something you are supposed to do, it does not matter who it hurts. If it is the quote-unquote right thing to do, you do it. That is basically Cyrus's mindset when you think of it as erasing the spirit. Alternatively, which I doubt, it could be the actual spirit itself, which would imply that even if he did die, Cyrus is gone. There is no afterlife at that point. Although, I will also state that we do get the Cyrus that succeeded in his plans within the Team Rainbow Rocket episode, who saw a giant shadow, then appeared before Giovanni and the other members. So, at least within the games, we can assume that would have been when Giratina was ready to restore balance because of Dialga and Palkia rampaging and being under the control of humans, and sit down and go, goodbye, and rip Cyrus apart. But Cyrus was saved because of Team Rainbow Rocket. The weird part is that all the Team Rainbow Rocket leaders succeeded in their plans, but were whisked away before they died. Every single one of them. Which only goes to show that the effects of their actions goes well beyond their teams, well beyond any of humanity's control. In the end, we could go around this one in circles and circles again and again. Did he die? Does he cease to exist? Is he saved and defeated in an alternate universe? In the end, technically all the answers are correct because we can safely assume that those are separate timelines considering how the end result plays out. Or we have 2 universes at least in place here, which we kind of know we do. 3 because it's the anime version. Go figure. Gary's 10 badges. Broski rolls up, sits here being like, I'm the best, and shows Ash 10 badges. Oh, you got 8? Ha! I have 10. So why is that the case? Well, the anime is far different and expands on the whole idea of the Pokemon League itself. Instead of there just being 8 gyms, there are actually way more. As long as you can establish a gym within your town, your city, and provide a good or service to them, then fantastic, you're a gym leader. In addition, not only do these gym leaders vary across the board, there are more of them. There's some at the Orange Islands for that matter, as they have their own league, which doesn't exist within the games themselves. But depending on when you challenge them, they look at how many badges you have and then choose their team based upon you, rather than you walking in and them automatically having a certain set of Pokemon at a certain level that they will always have. No, they ensure within the anime that you will always have a challenge, which is amazing. Now, that would explain why not only Gary Oak got more than 8 badges as he traveled more, but also explain and show how he is such an actually very skilled Pokemon trainer despite his negative attitude. It's a lot more cut and dry than it seemed at the time, at least. The disc-shaped Pokemon. This one just connects the ideas between Scarlet and Violet book that Toru and Sato wrote and a Pokemon that was seen in the book, which was before Terapagos was officially released. So we can see when this Iceberg actually stopped getting its new theories and was created before the DLCs of Scarlet and Violet. I would love to see when that goes a little further than this, but it is what it is. Verity is Cynthia's daughter. A resident of Twin Leaf Town in the Sinnoh region, Verity is the daughter, as stated, of a strong, famous trainer. However, she felt that she could not live up to her mother's expectations. Because of this, she decided to start her journey in the Kanto region after getting her first partner Pokemon, a Piplup. So we can see where this already began, where this story develops. A strong, famous trainer. Okay, what's the first one that comes to your mind? Mine usually goes to Cynthia, that could not live up to her mother's expectations. Whether it's inside a battle or outside of it through her research and everything else, Cynthia is, she excels. beyond anything anyone could ever imagine. Arguably one of the best champions in the world. She's well-studied, well-traveled, understands culture, understands mythology, history, archaeology, you name it. And she's an amazing battler and very active in the community. She was tracking down Team Galactic and was even there in other versions to be there for when everything went down at the top of Mount Coronet. She is hard to actually keep up with. So if you are her child, yeah, we can see where this comes from. And it doesn't help that Verity here ended up with a Piplup, a Generation 4 starter Pokemon, which we also know, we don't know what starter that she got, but we know that Cynthia did get a starter from our good old Professor Rowan. So everything's kind of lining up. But let's continue with the synopsis of Verity, who was first seen at a Pokemon Center where her Piplup was being treated. After receiving it back from Nurse Joy, she noticed a wanted poster regarding Team Rocket. She later raced out after hearing about a nearby sighting of Entei. Verity traveled along with Ash and Sorrel to Mount Tensei, where Ho-Oh then lived. Verity's mother was widely believed by many fans to be Cynthia, to whom the unidentified woman in Verity's photo bore a striking resemblance to. This belief was ultimately debunked, though, by the film's director, Kunihiko Yuyama. It would have been so cool, though. It would have been amazing. I would have loved to see that, like, Cynthia would have had a family. She'd be an amazing mother, probably. Let's be real here. She probably could homeschool her kid, and that kid would come out just top class and highly sociable still. Or maybe super into the books and not sociable at all. Either way, it's very cut and dry. Unfortunately, not supposed to be Cynthia's daughter. And we move on. Okay, this one tickles my brain a little bit. Paradox Pokemon are imagined. Let's start with analyzing the heart of this, Terapagos. Terapagos has the ability to alter timelines in some capacity, as seen in the core games and animated series. It is capable of bringing humans, certain Pokemon, and objects forward from other points in time or from alternate timelines altogether. While using this ability, a mist appears around the affected area. Once it disappears, whatever was brought is sent back. As seen in several Pokemon Horizons episodes, Terapagos also has the ability to create visions of its own memories. Due to the terrestrial energy its body produces, Terapagos was responsible for allowing advanced technologies such as Terra Orbs, the Professor's AI duplicate, and the quote-unquote time machine to exist in spite of human limitations. Terra Orbs directly exposed to the energy of Terapagos will gain the ability to terrestrialize Pokemon without the need to recharge. Big points from that. Bring creatures and people from alternate timelines, which are different universes. We have Paradox Pokemon, which a paradox is known as a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated or explained, may prove to be well-founded or true. That's like Pinocchio saying, "My nose will now grow." Pinocchio, when they lie, their nose grows. But if it grows, then they weren't lying. So why did their nose grow when they weren't lying and they told the truth? That's a paradox. So, let's take it further with the imagined Pokemon drawn by Heath, which were brought into quote-unquote reality in separate pieces, the pieces that made them up. The entries of our Paradox Pokemon also get a little bit weird. We have Hydreigon falling in love with robots, athletes being turned into robots such as Hariyama, the beasts representing 3 parts of what caused the extinction of dinosaurs, and our robotic swords of justice, which, oh gosh, that is an affront to everything that they stand for. They literally fought against humans and said, if you mess with Pokemon again and you hurt them, we will destroy you. And there is no doubt about it within any universe or system of existence. We will eliminate humans. I mean, they probably didn't say it that aggressively, but at the same time, I would not doubt if they actually did say it. Which, now that they're robots, they literally would be under the human's control. Robots are a construct of man, completely upending everything that they represent. It is a massive mind bend, but it's all theoretically possible. Because if you can imagine it, it's gotta be true somewhere in an alternate universe. A universe that Terapagos can then pull it from and into our reality. So, you know what? Originally, I hated this theory, but I'm down to believe it to some degree. It gets a stamp of approval from me, even though I'm not doing stamps of approvals for these. I just, whatever, you get it. Moving on. Ash's father identity. From the very minor portions of dialogue, it can be assumed that his father started on a journey from Pallet Town much like Ash. Never formally introduced, the identity of his father has always been under heavy speculation. These speculated characters, however, have attained no hard evidence that they are in fact related to Ash in any way, even being Giovanni at one point. In addition to that, during an interview with a storyboard artist for the anime series, the artist stated that Ash's father is a man who is on his own Pokemon journey as a trainer. Delia, his mother, occasionally murmured, Ash's father and grandfather are still on a journey somewhere with the aim of becoming Pokemon masters. What an envy. And in the last episode of season 25, Ash Ketchum is scheduled to meet him. However, he runs into some quests, and Mr. Ketchum eventually ends up busy meeting only Delia Ketchum. He leaves a present for his son, which is the iconic Pokemon hat from the original series. That hits in a very soft spot reading that one out loud. I would have loved to see Ash's father and grandfather, for that matter. Maybe it's possible that we still do, and we better. It's something that we've wanted for so long. Mans went out for milk and never came back home. And once again, this is another point where I'm going to ask you your opinion, and if you'd actually be legitimately interested in it. I would love to watch all the anime. All of it. I started doing it. I started running through the series. I think I got like 9 episodes in, but I mean, there just wasn't enough interest, and the channel was pretty, way smaller than it is now at the time. So if you want to see my happy-go-lucky reaction and synopsis of episodes and Pokemon movies and started getting into Pokemon Horizons for that matter, let me know. I would love to do it. Also, the watch hours would be a lot easier then. You'd probably get even more content really, really fast at that point. They'll put those on like once a week for sure. Saturday morning, Pokemon Acrylic. Woo, let's go. I don't know. Either way, it's just I would love to figure out more of Ash's family, especially if they're from Pallet Town, which is known to be a place where great trainers are born and raised. South America is real. South America is referenced in the Pokemon world, specifically in the context of Mew's origin, and is mentioned as a location in the Pokemon Mansion in Cinnabar Island. The specific location would be Guyana by all means, but this was also incredibly early on in the series, and I believe was also done during the Pokemon radio drama. Same thing, though, would go for China, India, and America for that matter, as we can get references directly to them or their names stated in Pokedex entries or just generally stated. What could be real fun though, because I don't want to just let that sit there, is what if all these places are real? The world is expanded. Imagine, the world is expanded. Ours take Earth and pump it up, right? Like a balloon. And we can see even more cultures and ideas, because the whole idea here is that at one point, apparently canonically, at least in the anime, Pokemon weren't always here. There were animals, and that's not just a, anime mistake thing. It was a mistake that the Pokemon appeared, it was a mistake that the animals appeared in the anime when they shouldn't have, but apparently animals did exist at one point. So, I would love the idea that maybe animals existed, humanity existed, and we move forward, seeing through time different cultures and continents and people being discovered, that the world is much larger than it actually was thought to be, and we start seeing Pokemon, we start seeing new countries that are very similar to ones that already exist, not just being based on them, but actually just similar to each other. And it's something we already see when you look at the history of some places to others, when you look at myths, when you look at cryptozoology, when you look at religion. There's a lot of similarity between humans across the world, and it's beautiful to my brain. What's also interesting, though, is we don't know any of the continent names or the name of the world itself, just Planet Pokemon, or we know that Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn are close enough that they are kind of considered to be the same continent or nation in some capacity, which makes sense considering that they are based on sections of Japan. So, who knows? Maybe there's an unofficial mixing happening. If New York could be an entire region, then anything is genuinely possible. Also, to all my people from all over the world, hi! Thank you for watching my videos. I envy a little bit your ability to listen and understand multiple languages. And some of you who flat out have commented on videos and said, I'm from Hoenn. Like, I'm literally in the Hoenn area. I've had comments recently like, I grew up in Alola, close to where the main character starts their story. And I'm like, I mean, yes, it's all based on real life, but oh my gosh, it's beautiful. That's amazing. So, thank you for watching my videos. It's wild to me. Shout out to y'all. Lyco is related to Ash. Originally, it looks like Raikou on the iceberg itself, R-I-K-O instead of L-I-K-O. That's simply because the L sound doesn't exist within Japanese pronunciation. The L is there, but it's just like a short Rai. So, Raikou is related to Ash. Anywho, this was early on in the series of Pokemon Horizons and the viewing and teasing of it, which, again, I really should watch, but it's one that is not true. And I don't know if it's something I want to be true. I want it to be separate. As much as I love Ash, let the female protagonist, and even if it wasn't female protagonist, let this new protagonist be completely unrelated to Ash and our characters that we have followed as main characters throughout all these years. Let this be a truly new journey. Let them create their own lives and let it not be something that is tied to destiny. No, these are people who work hard and have achieved things on their own. It makes it that much more special. And even if somehow they are related to other characters at this point, please, I beg the universe, do not let them say, because you were related to X character who did great things in the past, you were destined to do these things as well. No. It's like, yeah, you're related to them. You could have been a bum. You chose not to be. Congratulations. You did it. It's very much like the Unown heroes of old. They're not blood related. It turns out that anyone could be the Unown hero. Anyone. You just have to have the right qualities and be chosen by Reshiram or Zekrom. And I love that. I am skipping the one that says the next Legends game because that's basically irrelevant at this point, and we're going to Type Null being based on Arceus. Now, sure, yeah, not wrong. The most interesting part about it is, though, is that it is proven in Pokemon Sun, Moon, and Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, as the Aether Foundation is revealed to have visited the Kalos Library in order to get information necessary to create Type Null. I just realized I've had the wrong lighting on this entire time. So what was in that library in order to give the missing piece? On the top floor of the library, the player can read the books on the bookshelves. These books are philosophical in nature and delve into the history and existence of the Pokemon world as known. These books detail the numerous myths of Sinnoh region, which serve as a topic of interest and point of study for many, including Cynthia. These books include Sinnoh myth, which may refer to Arceus. That one is the most obvious, of course. Anything related to Arceus is incredibly important. After all, it is said that every story has a grain of truth to it. And it would appear that they would have learned about the plates of Arceus within this book, in which were mimicked through the discs that were used or are used on Type Full in order to make it change its typing. But let's keep digging a little deeper. Sinnoh region's mythology, which explains why wild Pokemon appear in grass before trainers. Sinnoh's myth, which explains the existence of the Lake Guardians. It is very interesting that despite knowing about the Lake Guardians, they don't dare mess with them. Maybe because they knew that the Lake Guardians were also incredibly powerful creatures, and messing with them is not the best idea. Maybe their whole intent, again, wasn't to just mess with reality and stuff like that originally, which we kind of know is the case. And we'll talk about more of that later. After all, as we did talk about earlier though, even Cyrus, who succeeded in his plan, is long gone at that point, or this point. There is no winning with the Lake Guardians, Dagapalkia, so on and so forth, by messing with them directly. Veilstone's Myth is another book which it tells a story about a young swordsman whose disregard for Pokemon leads to his encounter with Giratina, which Volo isn't a swordsman and he doesn't hate Pokemon. He just obsesses over the idea of meeting and even gaining the power of Arceus, of God itself. So that makes me wonder who this swordsman could have been. Wait. Oh, wait. It can't be the original hero, though. He was loved and praised. So it can't be him either, but he did encounter Giratina way back then. And he did defeat Giratina. This one gets a lot weirder. Again, more questions that we'll talk about later through other theories that do pop up in this iceberg. The original story, which explains the origin of the Pokemon world, give me that book, please. Come on. Like, yeah, we know Arceus just kind of everything into existence, apparently, but I need to know the details for sure, written in stone. I'm confident it just follows the normal Bible, if I have to be honest, though, which I've half written and could be an entire video of its own. Would be really fun to cover. There's just, this whole iceberg is just video ideas, if you haven't noticed. Now, there's another book called A Horrific Myth, which tells a horrible tale about the consequences of those who threaten the Lake Guardians. There goes our answer to our previous question. And Sinnoh Folk Stories, a book containing 3 folk stories. The first illustrates that Pokemon can be used for sustenance. The second implies that humans and Pokemon were once one and the same, or came to be separate through biological evolution. And the third folk story states that there was a time when Pokemon and humans had no distinguishable differences. Honestly, those folk stories could be absolutely massive, basically giving Aether the overconfidence and the folly of man necessary in order to think that they could capture the power of God itself through a construct of man, Frankenstein monstering R-Type full, only for it to spit in the faces of its creators. Nevertheless, while protein and other similar abilities exist in order to give Pokemon different types in battle, they don't compare to the full molecular shift that occurs with Arceus and the mimicking that occurs with Type Full, because we know Arceus can do it at will, and I should start calling it Silvally, as that is its actual name, was actually just created with the intention of fighting the Ultra Beasts, so it had to be able to adapt with the commands of a powerful trainer it would respect. But I'm sure there may have been other, more sinister plans in mind, with some individuals such as Faba being involved. After all, you don't just mimic the power of God and leave it at that. Hunter J died. Who is Hunter J? Turns out, Pokemon Hunter J is a reoccurring character in the Pokemon the series Diamond and Pearl. She is a Pokemon hunter who, with the help of her henchmen, captures and steals Pokemon and sells them as requested by her clients for a profit on the black market. Although she did succeed in capturing the Lake Guardians, her ship was hit by 2 future sight attacks, used by Uxie and Mesprit directly before she captured them, which, in her overconfidence, she had forgotten. As a result, her ship crashed into Lake Valor and was sucked into a whirlpool while she and her crew members were still on board. Once the ship was underwater, the protective glass broke, the ship flooded, and it exploded. It is unknown if Jay, her Pokemon, or any other of her crew survived. Oh my god, yeah, she's dead. She's dead. I'm terrible with actually watching movies. I did a great job of studying a lot of them and not watching them, so I know a lot of information that I otherwise should not know. And I just recently watched The Meg and The Trench, right? And when you are looking at just getting the visuals of this is a whole other ballgame. But when you think about things going underwater, lots of pressure. You need to depressurize, pressurize, and keep a balance of it all. Otherwise, things just implode and you die. When there's an explosion underwater, that is a lot of power because it has to explode. Otherwise, there's so much pressure, you will not explode. You will implode. Depth charges are a whole other ballgame on top of that I won't talk about because I haven't done any research on that. This is me talking off the noggin. This is insane. Again, hit by Future Sight, went deep into the lake, everything broke and flooded, so all the pressure probably started really crushing them to some capacity, even if it isn't super, super deep, because we don't know how deep the lake is, and then the ship explodes. They're not surviving. Look, there are rules that have to happen within animated series where a lot of the time you can't show on-screen full-on death, even if it is done in a cartoony fashion. It's a rule. It happens with Invader Zim, Pokemon all the time, and many other shows. It's just something that is put in place by a producer most of the time, even if the writer does not want that to be the case. So, in place of direct death being shown, we get terrifying fates like this one being shown instead, an off-screen death that is inevitably inescapable. Pokemon Z content. I'm not going to blow your ears out, but skip after this segment if you don't want to hear me laugh like Ren and Stimpy-esque maniacal laughter in 3, 2, 1. In all honesty, X and Y was the best selling game, and it never even got a third game like most of our other games. Everyone wanted Pokemon Z. We had Sword, Shield, we never got Gun for that matter. So the list, everything goes on, but even Sun and Moon got Ultra versions of their game rather than a full-on third game. In the end, this is just partial marketing and potential long-term planning, because that is an interesting ball that doesn't just accidentally get dropped. You cannot look at your second best selling game in your entire franchise and go, I don't think we should make a third game. I think this is perfect as is. I don't want to capitalize on this and make a lot of money. We'll just make a bunch of plushes to make up for it, and then, figure out something in the future. No. You can't tell me this wasn't deliberate. Even if they weren't planning on making Legends ZA, they were planning something. And it just took this long for them to land on ZA instead of a different potential Z game. Shadow Triad identities. Placing my bet now, someone out there believes that the, the 3 restaurant owners, Silent and his 2 brothers, are the Shadow Triad. And oh my gosh, I was right, who would have guessed? The problem though is that in Black 2, White 2, we get a memory link that breaks that theory apart. We also get it in the anime and the manga, I'm pretty sure. But I wouldn't be surprised if this was another GS Ball situation, where, sure, maybe they were partially planning for them to be the same people, because think about how cool that would have actually been, especially with how their Pokemon line up. So let's break this down. We have 2 separate groups of triplets, being a 1 in 9,000 chance, roughly. In the Black and White arc of the manga, the Shadow Triad had masks that represented Pansage, Panpour, and Pansear. Early concept designs for the Shadow Triad also showed them with hairstyles that closely resemble their Striation brothers. Yeah, the back end of the hair is a little different, but we have some solid similarities in the front. Business in the front, gym leader in the front, criminal organization in the back. It's simple. And then we get into the ideas or the Pokemon that they use. The Shadow Triad use Lilligant, Basculin, and a Larvesta, representing the 3 types that the Striation gym leaders use, not to mention that in Black 2, White 2, Silent uses a Lilligant, and Crest uses a Basculin. So thank you to user Carter A. Jamie 12 for your breakdown on this one. This would have been so much fun to see. Our first gym leaders being individuals that are far more deeply entwined into the opposite side of this same coin that is being a Pokemon partner. Foils to the plot having the potential to further drive the true idea of Pokemon liberation in its truest sense, and not in the way that Ghetsis lied about. Individuals that we know are supposed to be Ghetsis' main people, his closest subordinates, and individuals that are the last ones to see him, as when he is taken away at the end of Black 2, White 2, they say he lost his way, and that he is not in the mental state to hurt anyone anymore. The perfect balancing act for gym leaders, a dark and light. Though the parallels are still nice to see, even without them being the same people, and it's easy to see how they could have been in each other's shoes. Fun theory all in all, but debunked nevertheless. Pokemon are energy beings. This could come from a number of different things, considering the fact that entire Pokemon are concepts, such as those of truth and ideals, wisdom, intelligence, time, space, antimatter, the list goes on and on. In addition to the idea of being able to capture all of them, if they're willing, into a Pokeball, and then use a machine to heal them and send them away as they are converted purely into light that can be adjusted, changed, and so on and so forth, at least within the games and some of the anime as well, depending on the injury. This is also supported by the idea that infinity energy, or their bioenergy that it all starts out with, is the basis of their life, which can be turned into that full-on infinity energy for energy in general, for weapons, for submarines, for rockets, you name it. Nothing too crazy. If anything, it's not all that far-fetched, no pun intended, and it does open up the idea that, I don't know, they're not biological, but we know they are, so I'm not sure where to go with this one, honestly. Volo is a time traveler. Oh boy! Yeah, I know this one's been touched on by a lot of people, so let's break this down, and maybe I can cover, maybe one day, all the sins of time travel within the world of Pokemon one day. But rather than just repeat the words of others, I am gonna briefly break this down in my own way. And if you want a longer video that could easily be hours long, let me know about this one too. Just keep adding to your comments. The more watch time and comments, the better a video is. That is actually how YouTube works. Watch time, more interactions. Watch time is more important. So if you want to support a channel, literally give them a ton of watch time and comment on their videos. And then YouTube itself flat out says, wow, you're getting more watch time and you're getting more interactions. Fantastic. We're going to show this to more people and see what they think. Anywho, again, I'm going to break this down in my own way. We know that Volo, with the assistance of Giratina, was the reason for the creation of the space-time rifts. We see not only humans, but Pokemon that were brought in from the future. Examples being Train Man Ingo, who is originally from future Unova, and then we get Pokemon such as Porygon, which cannot exist without there being computers. We also don't get Ditto, which raises a lot of questions that I will talk about later on this Iceberg list. And what we already talked about, actually. We also know that Volo and Giratina have the final plate, the Ghost Plate. With the power of the plates and the rightful owners, great power is bestowed, as is the lore of these plates. This theoretically means that Giratina and Volo were meant to hold on to that plate, even if it truly belongs to Arceus. It was a plate imbued with the power of ghosts, so who's to say that it wouldn't allow the rightful owner to have the power of ghosts in some capacity? In this case, Volo could have been far more twisted by Giratina and its suffering, its malice, its hatred towards Arceus for banishing him away all those years ago. What also makes all of this interesting is how Volo knew way more than he ever let on. His blood relation to the ancient Celestica people, knowing about Arceus itself as well, which we didn't know about until Cynthia did her legwork hundreds of years later and came to not only the realization that there would be something greater than Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, but that it was possible to reach this greater being. So, explain to me, how did Volo and only Volo know? Well, there are two actual options here. One of them being Kogita, who, again, we'll actually discuss later on her details and history, and the other one being Giratina. Unlike other Pokemon, who doesn't seem to communicate telepathically even in the anime, instead has always been a creature of action, one that shows and does not tell. In other words, it is incredibly likely that Volo has done some extensive time travel. We can think of every Pokemon that comes to the Rift as yet another Pokemon from another potential land, another potential time, another potential universe even. Volo made trips to future Sinnoh for info on Arceus, potentially even Catalog Library, to Unova, which is how Ingo got sucked into the past, to wherever the heck he had to go because the fossil Pokemon had to appear and they weren't just running around in the wild future Sinnoh as well, so he had to go in the past at some point too, which could mean that Volo took a stroll in the past of the Sinnoh region, which would explain how he also knows so much about the Celestica people, more so than just Kogita would tell him or be able to tell him. Look, time travel gets messy, and there's a reason why that could be its own entire video. I would have to break down every single Pokemon, every single person that we see, and see why did they appear. And does Volo, going into the future and past, actually mess with lineages? There's the whole reason that some of our Pokemon trainers that look like each other, or gym leaders, or ancestors, and everything look like each other, could be because of Volo messing with the time-space continuum and causing that direct lineage to happen no matter what, or whatever else he did. So, again, another one that I am actually putting on my future video list one day because I personally would love to take a swing at it. Ash is in a coma. I'm only talking about the coma stuff once, okay? I'm saying this right now. The coma stuff bores me. He got knocked out by Pikachu when he got electrified the first time he got Pikachu. Because he's human. And then he hit the ground. And then he's been dreaming all of this since then. And that's why he's young forever. Moving on. Kogita and Volo relation to Cynthia. This one is also supposed to lean into the entire idea of who is related to who throughout Pokemon, with the two being distant ancestors. In fact, they kind of mirror the grandmother-grandchild relationship that we see with Cynthia and her grandmother, though we don't exactly know if the two are directly related to each other by blood, being Kogita and Volo. Oh my goodness, I lost his name for a split second, even though it's on my script. It would also be a very nice parallel to the current times. I've mentioned it before, but entire human family tree within Pokemon one day would be fun. And this is one that I do subscribe to. I think a lot of people subscribe to the idea that Kogita and Volo are related to Cynthia, though we don't know who is a direct ancestor or anything like that. Just really strong genes going through that bloodline. Who made the second Mewtwo? Let's break this one down. Actress Reiko Takashima voiced a second unrelated Mewtwo in the Pokemon anime special Mewtwo Prologue to Awakening and its direct sequel, Pokemon the Movie, Genesect and the Legend Awaken. This second Mewtwo is voiced by actress Miriam Potro in the English dub. So yes, there is very much likely a second Mewtwo, whereas the first Mewtwo we are familiar with is definitively male voiced at least. This second Mewtwo has a female voice. Though it shares some aspects of its personality with the previous Mewtwo, this Mewtwo differs in a number of different key ways. It is far less harsh in its hatred of humans, instead merely distrusting them and wishing to be left alone by them. It also merely asked Virgil, Anna, and Oscar to forget they met it as opposed to wiping their memories, as well as finding distaste in the red Genesect willing to attack buildings and homes where innocent humans live during their battle. This Mewtwo is able to sympathize and identify with others, as when it met the Genesect army, it insisted that they went along with it to a place where unnatural Pokemon should exist. However, it is also capable of acts of great power, such as pulling all the water in a lake into the air to douse a forest fire and flying into the atmosphere itself. So we ask the question once more, where did the second Mewtwo come from? Because we've seen Pokemon from movies and the anime return and interact with Ash and the gang, remembering their history with each other typically, yet there's no recognition here between them. There are, of course, ideas floating out there, even by the idea that there is likely a third Mewtwo, thanks to Giovanni and his Mecha Mewtwo, and that Mewtwo's willingness to listen to him without recourse or anger or whatever until the end of the movie, where it decides to boom everything that Giovanni has. Look, all of that gets really complicated. The sources of Mewtwo's creation really come from either Team Rocket, or maybe even Mewtwo created the other Mewtwo, considering that Mew is the ancestor of all Pokemon. Who's to say Mewtwo couldn't create more Pokemon itself? Could create a new wave of Pokemon for that matter. Give me that reality. A whole new lineage of Pokemon with Mewtwo as the ancestor. I'm sure nothing could go wrong. Inside a Pokeball. This is actually a topic often explored, and we just got a somewhat of an answer. In Pokemon Horizons, the streamer known as Nido Thing releases a video on Pokeballs which Roy watches within the show. Nido Thing and their Quaxly demonstrate a few different types of Pokeballs, but when it gets to the Luxury Ball, it actually provides a view of the interior. Inside, Quaxly relaxes on a couch, sipping on a beverage in a stemmed glass with a disco ball overhead and what appears to be a full bar in the background. The moment was picked up on by Joe Merrick, the founder of the notable Pokemon fan site, Cerebi. So, sure, the Luxury Ball is covered, but what does that mean for all the other balls? Could I catch a Magikarp in a Sky Ball and it'll be falling forever in a torturous lament of life? Is that what's gonna happen? No. Also, lament is the worst word to use in that exact moment. I was just using a fun word in a terrible example. Either way, just imagine that though. Every single ball that you have provides a different experience. You catch a Pokemon in a Dusk Ball, not just because it's a nighttime Pokemon or a Pokemon within a cave, but because that's the environment in which the Pokemon loves the most, making it more likely to stay in the ball as its new home because it likes it. Not just because it's more effective in the literal mechanical sense, it's more effective because of the preferences of the Pokemon. So, do whatever you can to not catch your Pokemon in net balls, because it likely means that they're drowning for the entire time that they're in the Pokeball. Legendary Pokemon aren't unique. They're not. They're not. There are multiple Latios and Latias. There's a Rayquaza. I'm pretty sure everyone's seen it at this point, because you can't avoid it, but there's a shiny Rayquaza that exists within Horizons now. What else is there? There's multiple Mewtwo. Mew is the only real unique one. Maybe Ogerpon is also unique, and Pecharunt for that matter. But so many legendary Pokemon have multiple of them. Koraidon, Miraidon, there's so many more. And the reason for this is actually because legendary Pokemon are not meant to be unique in the numerical sense. There's not just supposed to be one of them for all of them. In fact, they are supposed to be legendary because they impact the history of Pokemon. Regigigas pulled the continents. Latios and Latias changed or saved a child, actually, and changed the lives of historical people who then began to be friends and kind of worship them. Rayquaza stopped the battling between the Leviathan and the giants that are Kyogre and Groudon. It goes on and on. They change history. They're a part of history, big or small, does not matter. Or they're the first ones to be a part of that history. Koraidon and Miraidon were the first future and past Paradox Pokemon that entered our world. So, yes, legendary Pokemon are not unique. Red can't talk. Not that he won't talk, he can't talk. He is a mute, if you would. Is that? Hold on, I need to check something. And I mean that in the more literal sense, he is actually mute, not in the sense of that he is nonverbal, but he could also be nonverbal. We don't really know. We can't really hit a medical diagnostic on this individual within the game that he is in. So it's kind of a toss-up. Maybe he is nonverbal. Maybe he is mute. We don't know. And there is a significant difference between them, and you don't want to call a nonverbal person mute, just so that everyone is clear. And this all stems from the idea that anytime we interact with Red, throughout all the games, even in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, he does not talk. He just has the same forward-looking glance that he does. And then the triple dots, the ellipses, if you would. And then he battles. Simple as that. Though, while that is interesting in the canon and that is different within the games and other versions of him, in the manga and in the Pokemon miniseries, we do see a talking Red as our main character. So, who knows? Maybe he is just nonverbal. Maybe he's mute. We'll never really know. Necrozma created the Z crystals. Now, this actually gets a little bit interesting because there's the sparkling stones and then there's the Z crystals. Either way, the idea here is that whenever Necrozma got hit by the meteor, or whenever the people of Ultra Megalopolis decided to fire upon him, Necrozma was damaged, weakened, and from its body came the Z crystals or sparkling stones, for that matter. There's a lot of here or there. I've seen actually people argue that the sparkling stones and the Z crystals are completely separate, and that the Z crystals weren't created by Necrozma. In fact, the light of Ultra Necrozma and its radiance that went through the multiverse ended up coalescing into Z crystals because it has the same energy as Z power and what the Ultra Beasts have and the Totem Pokemon have and Z moves have. But at that point, what is truly the differentiating factor between them all? If they're all created by Necrozma's body or the light of Necrozma, it's still coming from Necrozma. The big difference, though, is that Necrozma did not intentionally create whatever came off of its body when it became damaged, whereas anything created by its light was indirectly intentional. Zygarde in Alola. Its cells are everywhere. I mean that not just in Alola, not just in Kalos, but literally everywhere. The whole point of Zygarde is that it is the world's protector. It serves as the environmental, ecological pinpoint and center of balance within nature and man, or rather nature and manufacture or unnatural world, or however else you really want to say it for that matter. Anything that is a danger to the ecosystem these cells will group up more and more and more until eventually, if they have to, they will hit their 100% form and they will bash it down into the ground, erasing it from existence. Ultra Beasts are a danger to the ecosystem. They are based on invasive species, or a chunk of them were. There was a whole purpose of it, and then they're not really invasive species anymore. They are within the games, but they're not based off of invasive species once you look at some of them. In the end, they are a generalized invasive species to our universe and serve as a great threat. We can even look at the Guzzlord incident of when people of Alola had a big corporation come in, created a lot of waste, that then caused so many problems within Alola itself that the Tapus, who draw their power from nature and protecting it, no longer had the power necessary, nor did they have the Z power from the Light of Necrozma to fuel them and fight against Guzzlord anymore, until Guzzlord destroyed everything and created a barren wasteland as people had to leave to a different planet. Water, land, nothing was safe as Guzzlord would eat everything. It's also important to note that Zygarde was there, I believe in the manga, to actually fight against the Ultra Beasts, and was there to, in the anime as well, fight against the whole situation that Lysander was creating with his false Zygarde. So yes, it's not out of the realm of possibility for Zygarde to be there in Alola, to see its cells or anything, and for that matter, it's not impossible to see those cells anywhere. It's when those cells make themselves apparent that we start to have problems, because it means that there is a potential threat waiting there, which is very interesting because we do see them in Legends ZA, meaning we may see a lot more of Zygarde, its power, and who knows, maybe we'll get the big ol' false Zygarde that Lysander ended up creating. That'd be really cool because that was an incredibly powerful creature that I'm afraid of. Cubone Theories. I have no idea what this could mean if I have to be real, so I suppose I could go through my list of what this could be, which is a fairly short list, which one of them is that Cubone and Kangashkin are related. That is simply due to the fact that Cubone looks a lot like the little tot that is inside of Kangaskhan's little pouch, the marsupial that it is. And the idea from that stems from not just their relation, but the idea that maybe Mother Kangashkin bit the dust, and then, you know, Cubone goes from there. They do have a couple of visual similarities, and some people did tie in the whole Missingno idea, but even with Missingno, there are a lot more Missingno than have ever been really talked about in many forms of media, so that's not really reliable. Another form is actually the Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon SOS battles, which is also not super reliable because some Pokemon of other species can be called in, not just family-related Pokemon. So it's another one that is not entirely reliable in terms of confirming this information, but it is still fun either way to consider the idea that, hey, maybe since they were related in the past, even without direct code or evolution, that they would call them in for their SOS. The last thing that this could be is the idea that Cubone is just a Charmander after the tail goes out, which is the idea that a Charmander without its flame on its tail will die. We haven't really seen this happen before. Sure, tails have gotten really close and the Charmander's gotten really scared of the flame going out, but even once it hits Charizard, it can let the flame go out and it'll live. It can have the flame so hot underwater that it never goes out. So, maybe there's the chance that a Charmander that loses its flame does become a Cubone. Lots of theories were going around. They were always fun back in the day, but they are just that. Little theories that will never really come to fruition outside of just what exists within our minds. And we got Alola Marowak, so I'm fairly satisfied. Power of Alola. The power of Alola, according to the series, is Ash's love and care for the region. This was used in, of course, the pinnacle moment of the anime where he was up against Kukui, as Kukui was using the giant monster of Tapu Koko and its Nature's Wrath form. Ash has a big speech about how they felt, him and Pikachu, the power of Alola throughout their entire journey, through the lands, and as Pikachu sets off for his big 10 million volt Z move, he says, "And now we're about to become one with that power," as they together completely overwhelm Tapu Koko's attack and win the battle. The big question then is, what is the power of Alola? Well, it isn't anything that we really don't see anywhere else. It's the rivals, friends, great challenges, reaching goals, and so much more. And I know if I don't say it now, there's going to be a comment that says it. So you're telling me the power of Alola was the friends we made along the way. I mean, yeah. And while Ash, may have gone through many other regions, maybe in those places, he was too focused on the gyms, too obsessed with becoming the best to really take in the culture. And let's be honest, Alola is rich with culture. Maybe he really did immerse himself within Alola in ways that he never did anywhere else. After all, it's where he won and became not only a champion, but the first real champion of Alola, of an establishing league within the world of Pokemon. So yeah, it's genuinely beautiful to consider the idea that Ash understood Alola more than he did any other region. And considering the bond that he has with his Pokemon, it would make the most sense for him to have earned his victory here. It's an interesting little lesson. You could, in your goals, stay hyper-focused on your singular goal and blast through everything around you. Or you could take your detours when they do arrive, picking and choosing them, and really experience life on your way to accomplishing that goal. It may take longer, but you enrich not only your life, but the lives of others along the way, absorbing it all and allowing yourself to truly be a part of the world around you, instead of a singular individual reaching your singular goal. And Ash did that in Alola. Lyco is in a coma. I said I'm not doing coma stuff. Moving on. Our last one for the tip of the iceberg is Nemona stalks the player. I mean, by all technicality, yeah, she's literally there at every single turn, but we also serve as the first real challenge that exists within the world of Pokemon, or at least within Paldea, to her. She's so eager to battle us that she doesn't even realize the health of our team, but isn't negatively aggressive about it, challenging us as soon as we exit certain gyms. In the end, she is just genuinely excited, curious, and ready to nurture a new trainer into becoming her next rival if they have the resolve to do so. And clearly, as the player, as the story continues on, she does become more excited and hopeful, seeing how other trainers have lost to gym leaders along the way and given up, going after different treasures, not wanting to become champion. And yet here we are, moving our way up, getting through the challenges, doing more than just fighting the gyms. And she sees this. Wouldn't you get excited if after so many years, obviously she's not like ancient or anything, she's a young adult, but wouldn't you get incredibly excited if after multiple years, you beat the champion and there's nobody else that's really there to challenge you? That the whole reason you're a part of this college, by all means, is to meet like-minded people and be better at what you want to have as your career. And yet you don't meet anybody who has that same drive, that same energy, that same love. And then that one person arrives and everything clicks. In the platonical sense, you are what she was looking for, a challenge. And as you grow, you become more and more of a challenge, rather than somebody who has talent and beats her in a Pokemon battle right away in the beginning of the game. So we could call it stalking, but in reality, it is just her being a nurturing leader within the world of Pokemon that isn't an adult figure. On to our next section of the iceberg, starting with the ultimate weapon split the timeline. Oh god, more timeline stuff. Okay, this one is actually not unheard of, and it's really cool. So, with every choice that exists, whether you follow through with your decision or not, and whether it succeeds or not, ultimately will create technical rifts in time and an alternate universe. They will diverge, but they may come back together at a singular point, meaning that your choice actually meant nothing. For every possible choice, there is that diverging universe if big enough. You could drink water right now, or you could ignore your thirst and then continue to ignore your thirst until you dehydrate and die. That would be the biggest difference you can make. Otherwise, you may get sick, you may not get things done for the day, you may not be fast enough at getting it done, or maybe you'll still get all those things done because you decided to drink water, or you're not as thirsty as your body might think you are, or something along those lines, right? The biggest difference is when those timelines, again, do not merge back together thanks to a much larger decision, something that would affect more than just your thirst. In this case, the fork in the road is when AZ decided whether or not to fire the ultimate weapon, with firing it not once, but twice. Once to revive his Floette, creating Eternal Floette, and the second time to end the war with catastrophic damage. Both are theoretically decisions. Both could have resulted in different timelines, and in this case, we understand that the ultimate weapon was the reason for the Mega Stones being created. Energy from Xerneas and Yveltal, harnessed and released in such immense amounts, resulted in a change that reverberated through timelines. This would also line up with what we talked about earlier, being the idea that the timelines within Pokemon are primarily split by the idea of the Mega and non-Mega timeline universes. So, I'm in on this theory. I'm all in on this theory. It'd be really cool to imagine the idea, or the terrifying idea, of maybe AZ only fired the destructive portion of the weapon to get vengeance, completely overcome by malice, not thinking or actually being able to revive his Floette. What countries, what regions would have still existed after his reign of terror at that point? Would he have gone all in on that destruction? What if he never decided to try and change after bringing back his Floette? Maybe he brings back Floette and he doesn't destroy everything. There are so many possibilities out there that this one's incredibly fun, and we already, technically, have those two universes existing out there. Arceus' 1,000 arms were unknown, the Pokemon unknown. Now, the Unown and Arceus have always been seen as very tied together. In fact, when you look at the Sinjoh ruins, that's how you get to go see Arceus. You see them floating around him. The Unown have also changed throughout the years, seeing through Oak's computer how they even used to look like, you know, the Greek alphabets or other phonetic pieces of, I almost said literature, but I think you guys know what I'm getting at. They have changed throughout the years and are theorized even by many people to be the building blocks or the code of the universe, created to bind the universe together, holding small fragments of Arceus' power when separate, but when brought together, they could create entire universes. They could change reality, grant wishes, and so much more. I would love for Arceus' 1,000 arms to be unknown, but we know that they are Arceus. We know that they are the one true Arceus' 1,000 arms is the Arceus that we know. But it would still be pretty cool to think that the Unown potentially are 1,000 arms of the Arceuses that we know. That whole two sentences hopefully made sense to you. And it would be way more fun in that case to think of it as Unown are Arceus, as Arceus is still one true being. Maybe Unown are like the Zygarde cells to create Arceus. That'd be really cool. That's not the case, but it would be a fun alternative idea to explore within fan games or fan writing. So I'm in on this one. This one's a really fun idea. Genesect is Kabutops. So this is all because of their stance, the way that they look in their discus-shaped faces, so on and so forth. They do look fairly similar. We can also drag this into the idea of Scyther also being a part of this, as well, as many people thought that Kabutops and Scyther were related to each other. Although, when we look at Genesect and how it states over 300 million years ago, it was feared as the strongest of hunters. And more specifically, later on, it was stated that it was an ancient bug Pokemon. So even if we remove, bug Pokemon, maybe it isn't then Kabutops because Kabutops isn't a bug Pokemon, we could still look into the timeline of that and know that if it is a bug, or 300 million years ago, we don't line up to when Kabutops would have actually been around if we look at their real-life comparison being sea scorpions. The terrifying, terrifying sea scorpions, apex predators of the sea. Whereas 300 million years ago, we're getting into the Cambrian area, when bugs were all over the place and giant in size due to the oxygen in the air and the fact that they could actually absorb it and process it, allowing them to be larger, because if we were around during that time, we would not we would not be able to be giant humans. That's not how that works with every single creature. It's really weird, and I don't quite understand it, so I'm not going to continue talking about that science on it. Either way, when we look at the timeline, and the idea that Pokemon actually tends to follow the timeline and ideas of when ancient Pokemon existed, and their fossils were not fossils, I suppose, we can find that Genesect and Kabutops are unrelated, just like how Kabutops and Scyther are unrelated. Pikachu speaks. In the movie Pokemon I Choose You, Pikachu speaks English, saying, "I always want to be with you," in a teary scene where Ash has a vision after saving Pikachu from a fatal attack. This scene caused a stir among fans, with many finding it unsettling or even a bit of a shock to hear Pikachu speak in English. Ash was literally dying on the ground, and he is hallucinating this. He is sitting there going, "I saved my best friend. I'm gonna die now." "Don't die. I want to be with you forever." "Okay, Pikachu. I guess I'm not gonna die now. Thank you very much. I now have the energy to live eternally," as a 14-year-old or whatever the heck, however old Ash is. Even if we remove, the hallucination aspect of it, Ash has always been said to be able to understand Pokemon flat out multiple times, and people such as Misty or Brock have looked at him and go, "Wait, you know what your Pikachu is saying?" Goes, "Yeah? You're telling me you can't understand Pokemon?" And it's not a gag. Usually Ash is a little bit teasing or can joke around a little bit or be a punk, but there's a lot of the time where Ash is too oblivious to the emotions or understanding of others and gives flat out confused responses like, why would you use that Pokemon? What, you can't understand that Pokemon? You're a girl. Why does it matter? Why, of course you're scared of bugs. Like, all these things are things that Ash, as a young adult, sits down and is just like, yeah, he has no tact whatsoever. So it would make sense that Ash legitimately straight up understands Pikachu, and that might have been one of the only instances as of us, the audience, being able to understand Pikachu directly, if we don't consider Detective Pikachu and other small franchises. Not franchises, games or other forms of media. Eternal flower form. I assume this is about Eternal Floette. I don't really know where the theory from this comes from. I mean, I assume there is the idea that the flower itself is eternal and not Floette. This is because of the fact that Floettes do attach themselves to flowers and they're able to keep each other alive. So, as long as the flower is alive and healthy, getting sunlight, so on and so forth, it in turn, through their symbiotic nature, especially considering their ability, symbiosis is I believe what it is. Now I gotta double check. Big points to me for remembering it's symbiosis. We get the whole idea that if the flower is eternal and not actually Floette, then if Floette releases that flower, it will not be eternal anymore, it will not be immortal, and it will one day die. That is why we have to stick to this flower, which is an extinct flower that is no longer found anywhere within the world of Pokemon, supposedly, anymore. So it makes even more sense that Floette would hold onto it. It is the last of its kind. So again, I assume the theory really holds that the flower is eternal, not necessarily Floette itself, though it does have visual motifs from both Yveltal and Xerneas for that matter, with its coloration, which differs from other Floettes. So who knows? Maybe that Floette is eternal. Maybe the flower isn't. Either way, their symbiotic nature is keeping them both alive until that infinity energy that was poured into them runs out. Because it was bioenergy, infinity energy that was drawn from other Pokemon. Even if it were a ton of other Pokemon, there is assumedly a limit, and they will, despite being quote-unquote eternal, will have a natural lifespan, or unnatural lifespan, I suppose. Legendary beasts were originally Eevee evolutions. This one is another one deeply ingrained within my soul that I can freely talk about from memory. Of course, when Bell Tower burned down, we don't know the actual true nature or what the Pokemon were that had perished in the fire and everything coming down on them. As such, with their typings, Raikou, Entei, Suicune, electric, fire, water. What 3 Pokemon were super big at that time? Even if we do exclude our other Pokemon such as Umbreon and Espeon, we get Jolteon, Flareon, and Vaporeon. Pure typings that would have existed in their times. And on top of that, we do have the sisters, the Komodo sisters that are of that Ecruteak City that each have a evolution. A big portion of the game is fighting the 5 of them and then going to go see Ho-Oh. Well, these Komodo sisters, you sit them down and their dedication to Ho-Oh, to the bell tower, to the story, the dancing, the keeping of their culture within Ecruteak City, you would have to imagine at the very least their Pokemon would reflect their understanding and respect towards that history. Even Morty is a historian. He is a ghost-type gym leader who is able to speak with ghosts and is really good at history, meaning he just speaks to the ghosts and gets to learn the history of the bell tower and everything around the area. But ultimately, why would they have the evolutions? Simply because there's a very good chance they were related to the bell tower burning down. As such, it is fairly likely, or at least accepted by the community, that before they were revived by Ho-Oh, the 3 original legendary beasts were Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon. I just realized that entire time I called it the Bell Tower, it was the Brass Tower and is currently widely known as the Burned Tower. That's staying in to purely embarrass me and my mistake, especially since I was so overconfident in my ability to remember that whole thing by heart. Wobbuffet's tail is its head. Sure, it has eyes on its tail, and its eyes on its face never really open up. It's very protective about that tail, even while it is asleep, very rarely allowing it to actually come out. And its body, the large mass that we know, is just a punching bag, even if it does emote. It wouldn't be the first time that we see some sort of false body or false appendages or facial portions of a Pokemon within a Pokemon's design. So it's a fun theory all in all to imagine that the tail is in fact the head. The body allows itself to get hit over and over again as a protective measure, countering against anybody that does hit it, and it's overall not a big deal to see it get damaged. Sadly though, it is just a tail. Ash's Pikachu got a level reset in the anime in Pokemon Black and White. This one becomes real messy really quick, and we need to start with the Snivy example that most people are going to be aware of when you think of this theory if you are familiar with it. Basically, Ash's Pikachu ends up fighting Zekrom, is then injured, and then a Snivy with Leaf Tornado bops him, while Ash is confused as to why Pikachu isn't able to fight with his best moves in that battle, which is all because he is injured. We of course could theorize that Pikachu got a level reset after Zekrom, or the injury changed Pikachu in some way. But this is really just another theory I admittedly don't want to spend a lot of time on, just because it can be well explained away by knowing if we kept Pikachu at full power, we would have this Superman effect. You either need to get rid of Superman for the episode, like they do in Young Justice, constantly just pew, popping him away and keeping him away until the end of the episode, or you lock him away, or you will always just have this get out of jail free card that the main character can use, or the people can use at all times, which destroys tension within an animated series, or any series at all for that matter. And in this case, we have Pikachu, who is our Superman, the mascot. So instead of getting rid of the mascot, you lower their powers and you call it a day. Rei and Akari from Pokemon Legends Arceus are Lucas and Dawn. So the entire beginning of Pokemon Legends Arceus pulls us, the main character, from our present timeline into Arceus's domain. We're given the Arc Phone, yeeted into the Edo period, and are told that we need to document every single Pokemon. In addition, not even document, catch them, I apologize. In addition, Professor Laventon is aiming to do the same within the Hisui region, which is the original name of the Sinnoh region. But rather than just assuming we're some random idiot being chosen by Arceus, we can make the case that we were deliberately chosen. especially if we take in the whole idea of the canon characters and their canon names, and they even interact in Pokemon Masters and are like doing this Spider-Man meme looking at her like, oh, you look like me, I look like you, this is crazy. But again, though, we can make the case that they were deliberately chosen. Someone who has already proven themselves in some capacity. Maybe even someone who has already completed the Pokedex. After all, within Pokemon Platinum, we even get to meet Arceus alongside Cynthia. When we look at Arceus and other forms of media, it is vain enough to make an entire continent in its image. It's vengeful enough that after one human wronged it, it was ready to wipe out all of humanity until the Trio of Myth did everything they could to prevent that. Though Arceus is by all means omnipotent, selectively so, and never forgets anything from our understanding. So with all of that in mind, Arceus, likely just as any other creature does, has a preference, has a goal in mind that can only be properly reached by someone who's already completed it before. Occam's razor. Why choose somebody new when you could just choose someone who's already done before? The simplest answer is the correct answer. And with Giratina just, twiddling its thumbs, waiting for Arceus to rear its head, and then for Giratina and Voto together to just slap him into non-existence as part of their plan, Arceus knew that it would and could not act on the situation itself, otherwise all of existence could be wiped out, because it would lead them to the one original true creator. And it is said that with the right trainer, Giratina could truly defeat Arceus, so that's a no-go. So despite being one arm of the one true Arceus and having incredible power, it could be defeated. Though there is one being that has already proved itself within the world of Pokemon, and that would be the main character of the Diamond and Pearl games, Lucas or Dawn. Completing the Pokedex, befriending Pokemon, becoming champions, and having already met Arceus for that matter. Though in order to ensure the timeline does not become ruptured too much by our memories in the future, our memories are then wiped. Wiping memories will hopefully not ruin our own determination and our personality, also that way we could become the heroes once more, necessary to save the universe, as Rei or Akari. And of course, as Rei and Akari, you complete the deck, stop Volo, change Giratina's heart, save the universe, catch one of the 1,000 arms of Arceus before or after being allowed into its domain and fighting it, and then you get trapped in the past. Because screw us, I guess. Bye! Hey God, can I return back? Nah, you can keep the phone though. I'm sorry. I got a line to God. Just check my phone. In all seriousness, though, I hated this idea at first. I despised this. I was like, that's too basic. And then I read into it, and I will admit my fault. The more I looked into it, the more I realized it is actually very likely and a very fun theory to think about. All Pokemon can learn Minimize. So I, of course, had to look into this one, as honestly, a very small number of Pokemon actually learn Minimize by level up, and it is not a TM. The idea behind this is because in older games, the Pokemon became smaller rather than turning into energy and being absorbed into the Pokeball. It's a goofy and fun little theory and nothing more than I'm going to spend time on. Game Lily likes Elio. I had never truly realized that our main characters had a name after, I don't know, gold, silver, somewhere in there. I'm not really sure, but apparently Elio is our main character's actual name, and yeah, this one's primarily thought about during the Executor Island event. Meteor showers rain down, you're both under an Executor. It could be seen as more of a romantic moment as you talk to each other, and she's like, I'm so happy that I met you, blah, 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 so on and so forth, right? Although it is important to also understand that Lily really hasn't had anybody before this moment. Nobody to call her friend. Her family is a dysfunctional group, with her mother going crazy, her father missing, and her brother being edgy. And you, as a character alongside Kukui and Burnett, who act as parent figures, have all been incredibly kind and honest even after shortly meeting her. She is a little girl by all means, a young adult, impressionable, scared, and a bit of an introvert. So, combine all of that together, and we have someone who genuinely wants to be close friends with us, to make a difference, and looks up to us despite being our friend. She trusts us as our character, and is excited to see what we do and where we go next in the world. I've I'm not an introvert. I'm an extrovert by all means. I adopt introverts. I don't know how many of you that I've adopted at this point. Blessed I am, to be honest. But when you look at an introvert, the things that I've heard a lot of introverts say is that they don't choose many people. In fact, they get kidnapped by extroverts a lot. Oops. But they are, as introverts, people who, when they choose somebody, they become very, very attached to them. Not to say that I, as an extrovert, don't get very attached to people, but it is something that's a little bit more commonly said, I do suppose. And with Lily, again, having her more traumatic past, finally opening up to somebody is incredibly difficult. And when you do so, of course, you're going to be incredibly kind, very open, and could be seen as a liking or romantic way for that matter. But I assert it as more of a sense of admiration and true friendship. Gengar as Clefable's Shadow. Now that is a classic. I haven't heard that one in 20 years. And honestly, I would dare say, even if it isn't true, I love the idea even more now, since Clefairy and its line are actual fairies now, considering how the Fae always have an incredibly dark side to them, and I love the dark side of the Fae. It's always so twisted and cool. The idea is that it isn't actually Clefairy's shadow, but rather the ghost of a Clefairy, very much like a dead Shelder becoming Ghastly theory. You kill a Clefairy with poison, it comes back as a ghost poison type that is Gengar and is an accumulation of many souls. This all came about thanks to the way that they are shaped. After all, Pokemon works on a silhouette system. Make a Pokemon, and it should be so unique in shape, positioning, and size that if it were just a silhouette like we see with Who's That Pokemon? And people should be able to correctly guess the Pokemon with ease. If they're able to do so, congratulations, you're off to a great start. Makes me wonder if one day I should cover how to make a Pokemon. I know nothing when it comes to balancing them within the games or any other mechanic within the games. I'm not super great with the art style itself, but when it comes to lore, building a Pokemon, and the general ideas that you want behind creating a Pokemon, I've got that on lock and key. Maybe I'd leave that to an artist that I could commission in the future if the channel gets big enough. Spread the channel. Either way, when we look at their general shapes and silhouette, we get very similar Pokemon between Gengar and Clefairy. Of course, this can be said for many Pokemon that this was a major one, especially with how Gengar is never really seen in the wild, and Clefairy in lore is said to be a rarer Pokemon by all means. It's a fun theory, and of course there are Pokemon such as Primeape that do actually die in order to evolve into a new Pokemon, so as Pokemon has gone on and evolved, no pun intended, it has actually become a theory that is more possible despite them being entirely different Pokemon. Meltan Home Region. I've always expected it to be something like Sinnoh since I heard of it. It feels like it was something that would have been with the Celestica people because of it being locked away in a box to avoid it from rusting and dying out as a species, but let's dig into the theory. With Meltan originating within Pokemon Go, it's a Pokemon that doesn't have a region assigned to it because Pokemon Go does exist on Earth, or otherwise known as our dimension, not the Pokemon world. We see this primarily proven through Giovanni, as right before he went through the Ultra Wormhole in the Rainbow Rocket episode, he talked about entering other universes altogether. This hinted at his entry into the Pokemon Go game and Pokemon Masters EX, where he does directly talk about being the leader of Team Rainbow Rocket. As a side, he came to our world, earned mad moolah, then dipped out into EX. Man just ruined our economy and vamoosed. But that's still incredibly strange because people often associate Meltan with Sun and Moon because of the anime. It originated in Pokemon Go, but then it technically is part of the Kanto deck, so where is it from? Because none of this lines up. There are plenty of theories that it might actually be an Ultra Beast, but that doesn't make any sense because it doesn't have the special sound fonts included in every Ultra Beast cry or a prime base stat total as they all do. Because guess what? Even Cosmog and its line has that weird little tone included in its cry just like the Ultra Beast. So Meltan isn't an Ultra Beast, but That isn't to say that it isn't from another dimension or universe. It very well could be, but that too might be a little too easy for my tastes. Many other Pokemon like Kubfu, Ogerpon, Petramunt, and so on at least state that they are from, originally, a far-off land. Meanwhile, Meltan just says Meltan has been described in ancient texts in the same place the mystery box was found. The mystery box was created by Melmetal's followers to store away the Meltan created after its death until one day they could create a new Melmetal. At the end of a Melmetal's lifespan, it'll just rust and fall apart. However, its shards will eventually be reborn as Meltan. It is known to live in groups until the day comes where one strong Meltan absorbs the rest of the group to evolve. Professor Oak and Professor Willow were the ones to discover this Pokemon. A mystery box was also seen in the Sun and Moon series episode Evolving Research, where it was seen in the waters of Pony Beach with a group of Meltan moving away from it. So there theoretically should be a place where it came from within the normal Pokemon universe, and then Giovanni accidentally brought the box into Pokemon Go, I guess, because of all the other Pokemon entering our world and wormholes opening up and blah blah blah. I would love to assume it isn't from the Kanto, Johto, Sinnoh area, as those are incredibly far away from Alola. If anything, Kalos is a little bit closer to my understanding, which means that Galar and Paldea are all closer to Alola. And that might even lean into the whole idea of who knows. Maybe Meltan was one of the first man-made Pokemon and occurred after the Great War and after AZ kickstarted the whole idea of working alongside Pokemon, because I already subscribed to the idea that Golett was created by AZ and the people who had followed him after the end of the Great War. The theories genuinely, once again, are limitless, and we may never find the true answer, as it is just a good head-scratcher. Slowpoke is omniscient. I'm sorry. I'm gonna say that again. Slowpoke is omniscient. Sure, Slowpoke has also been the subject of fan theories, with some claiming that Slowpoke's slow reaction times are due to Slowpoke being omniscient and unable to comprehend everything the same way as a result. Just in case you don't know what omniscience is, here's the direct definition. It is the capacity to know everything. It is a state of having all knowledge, awareness, and an understanding of all things. So, sure, maybe it's getting overloaded. When we look at the Slowpoke line as a whole, we get to see one common occurrence across them all. When Shellder bites the head of a Slowpoke and digs into its brain, the chemical reaction occurs as venom is injected into their brains. Slowking is created, and the Johtonian version is incredibly intelligent, matching and even exceeding humans, thoughts to even dream of solving the world's problems but waking up and forgetting those solutions. Meanwhile, Galarian Slowking has a different mixture of chemicals due to its diet of Galarica seeds, causing the reaction to instead increase the intelligence of the Clamperl on its head. Nevertheless, both become focused and able to properly communicate with others of its kind, plan out complicated tasks and execute them, and experiment with new ideas and speak in new languages. Johtonian Slowking is even able to speak the human language. So what could this all mean? If we were to assume Slowpoke is omniscient, then that would explain as to why it became so much more collected, focused, and outwardly intelligent when it evolves. Those chemicals in its brain being produced due to the new interaction between it and Shellder is like the ultimate ADHD drug focusing up the brain. Otherwise, it doesn't make all that much sense how the more venom is produced would mean that more chemicals makes it smarter. But if instead of just looking at the intelligence portion, we look at brain efficiency and ability to actually use the knowledge, to organize these omniscient thoughts and pick up the ones that need to be used right now. So, when we look at this, certain brain chemicals like dopamine, glutamate, and GABA, GABA, play a crucial role in cognitive functions and may be associated with intelligence and brain efficiency. The most interesting of which is glutamate, I found, an amino acid that acts as a neurotransmitter in the brain. It is the most abundant excitatory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system. Its functions include learning and memory, cognition, motor control, sensory perception, and regulation of mood and emotion, all of which Slowpoke's evolutions are all able to do better. So, yeah, I don't know how the glutamate is being created, but if it is being created, then it would explain its new control over its abilities and all of its other new characteristics and how the Galarian form differs because of the Galarian seeds and the different diet the Slowpoke have there, changing how it develops as a Pokemon. So, it is very possible that this theory could be true. Somehow, Slowpoke is naturally incredibly intelligent, can't organize and process the thoughts. Getting bit on the head or on the tail allows certain chemicals to then be created, primarily if it's bit on the head, that allow it to organize its thoughts or feel actual motivation and express it properly through organization of those thought processes, which I'm in. I'm bought. This is my new headcanon. Rainbow Rocket Ghetsis killed his end. Ghetsis has always been a backhanded individual. The only ones who ever knew his true plan were the Shadow Triad. Otherwise, he had kept everything to himself. All of his plans, his deceit, and his want to liberate Pokemon only for him to catch the powerful ones for himself and pretty much take over the world from there. Though, of course, it didn't start or stop there, as he intended to instill N with the values necessary to create the new hero who could tame Reshiram and be the new king, the new hero of Unova, a placeholder for his own reign. And by getting his hands on Kyurem, he could even hope to create the original dragon once he captures the last dragon necessary for the original dragon, Zekrom. Once this is complete, N was already having second thoughts during his fight with Alder, realizing that Ghetsis may have been a liar all along, that he doesn't truly believe that Pokemon should be free, and by this time, would eventually be guaranteed to have a snapping point once he would realize that Ghetsis was using him and intended to abuse the power of Pokemon. As a result, and because Ghetsis planned for this, N would be dispatched without much of a problem. If we look at Ghetsis' team and break it down, we can see it is a perfect counter to N's own team, being easily able to defeat N, and even get rid of him permanently. And we know Ghetsis is not above a little murder as a treat, as the dude literally crucified gym leaders in the Pokemon Adventures manga. So unfortunately, yeah, it's very much possible that Ghetsis flat out murders N and replaces him as king until eventually he would have met his own end, only to be saved by being brought through the wormhole and inducted into Team Rainbow Rocket. Mega Evolving hurts Pokemon. This is a classic that goes all the way back, mainly because with certain dex entries, such as Glalie jaw being broken or Tyranitar's back being split open, the only thing keeping it alive is its just raw, instinctual rage, is something that's very much directly stated within the Pokedexes. And I like to think of it this way. Not as a 100% guaranteed thing that will occur, or events that will occur, but rather something that occurs with the wrong trainer. The biggest example of this is Lucario, Mega Lucario, and Korrina in the anime. When Korrina uses her Mega Lucario, it goes on a rampage. This is all because Mega Evolution requires energy and control from the trainer and the Pokemon. If the trainer is unprepared and there is not a good enough link between the trainer and the Pokemon themselves, then the Pokemon can go out of control, they can become berserk, and all the negative consequences of Mega Evolution occur. Meanwhile, we have the other Mega Lucario, which is completely under control, and even later on in the anime, Korrina becomes a skillful master of her Mega Lucario, preventing it from ever going on a rampage ever again, despite those instinctual, overwhelming battle instincts kicking into Lucario. It is tamed. That energy is being focused. And that's what is happening. There's so much energy being poured into Pokemon when you Mega Evolve them that if you are not the right trainer, if you are not properly trained and prepared, then your Pokemon will suffer. So these are stories to prevent trainers from trying to Mega Evolve their Pokemon without that training and bond, or else both of them and potentially many more Pokemon and people will be hurt in the process. Man-made creation Pokemon. To be fair, this really isn't a theory or a mystery. There are plenty of Pokemon that we know have been created by man. The most mysterious of all, though, is definitely Magearna, considering I don't believe it when it says that it has an artificial soul, especially since it does use the infinity energy from other Pokemon just like the ultimate weapon did. So, yeah, what does that necessarily imply for a lot of our other man-made Pokemon? Did infinity energy get poured into them? And that's how they were created? Were lives of other Pokemon taken? And now we have new creatures like Porygon? How does that occur? That's something we'll have to save for the future and explore with all man-made Pokemon at some point. Runes of Alph Mystery Transmission. If the player listens to the Pokegear radio while near or inside the ruins, they will hear strange noises known as Mysterious Transmission on channel 13.5. In Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the player must be inside one of the chambers, and tuning the radio near the center will broadcast these noises. It also increases the chance of encountering an unknown the player has not yet encountered. So what's interesting about this is that the unknown were only said to appear once the Goldenrod radio tower was put into place. We know the unknown have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, potentially the beginning of time if they truly are directly tied to Arceus, but then disappearing, reappearing with the tower, and then having a mysterious transmission within their own cave makes it all very interesting. What's more interesting is that while yes, it is a mechanic to ensure you can catch all of the different unknown, why couldn't it have just increased the encounter rate in general? Which also would still lead us to the same questions I will continue to talk about. Could it be that the signal is actually supposed to call all the unknown into one place? Because again, when separate, we know their powers are weak. But when they are together and they mass together, we know they can bend reality, create openings to their own realm, and so much more. The initial radio waves may have attracted them, thinking it was similar to signals that they may have received in the past, or is something that they can understand. They hijack those waves without any ill intent, and use it to communicate with their own kind and try to gather together once more. For what purpose, we don't know. They could simply be trying to return home, for all we know, because they aren't inherently malicious creatures after all, although this could just be another portal location they may open up, similar to the Sinjo ruins. Celestica people disappearance. This one went deep. What I'm gonna tell you is probably only about 2 minutes or 3 minutes, but I think I spent a good 30 minutes to an hour on this one. Like, way deeper. This goes way deeper than it seems to on the surface. If you don't know who the Celestica people are, Volo, Kogita, and assumedly Cynthia would all be the Celestica people. The real Celestica people. The ones who knew who Arceus was and worshipped it. Not only that, but they had faced the destruction of Giratina before, which is why statues of it have been destroyed throughout the region. In fact, the Celestica people were the ones, assumedly, that made the statues of our legendaries in that region to begin with. They basically wrote the Pokemon Bible that are the old verses, and even more specifically, it can be derived from context clues that Kogita herself was the Celestica person left behind when they all left, and wrote these old verses as the Diamond and Pearl clans came in, took over, waged war on each other as they called themselves the true Celestica people, and the Force of Spring, Enamorous, disappeared but had made friends with Kogita. The question is, where did these Celestica people go? The old verses are as close as we get to info on them alongside anything that Kogita says, and how the verses tie together with Cynthia, her grandmother, and books within Catalog Library. I could go on for hours about this subject alone and the theories behind it, so this is something that will be added to my list of videos. Those old verses and the analysis of them alone could take upwards of an hour. And this subject excites me. It drives my curiosity. It's a great mystery that I hope gets solved one day, when it could have been solved in Legends Arceus, but hey, it's fine. Celebi time travel throughout the world. Give me that. We can have fun and give us all the answers of the ancient world of Pokemon. Moving on. Alder's ancestor was the legendary hero. According to Reddit user I Want a Manatee, I have the following. Just came upon a video about talking about Pokeballs, their history, and possible theories regarding how the design came to be. Anyway, during this video, they show and mention the original hero from Hisui in Pokemon Legends. This hero is said to have a collar of Pokeballs. Here is Alder's official artwork for those who don't recall his appearance. The picture clearly depicts someone that resembles Alder, perhaps a little bit too much. It could be argued that it is in fact him, no questions asked, if we didn't know a lot of the modern characters have ancestors within Legends Arceus. And that all is until you read trivia about Alder. Notably, 2 facts about him. 1, according to Bulbapedia, in the Japanese version of Pokemon Black and White, Alder speaks in old-fashioned Japanese. 2, the reason Alder carries more than 6 Pokeballs with him is because, according to an interview with Yusuke Omura and Ken Sugimori in a 2010 article of the Japanese magazine Nintendo Dream, he never figured out how to operate the Pokemon storage system. And, bonus tinfoil-worthy conspiracy coincidence, Alder shares his battle theme with 3 other characters, Ingo, Emmett, and Benga, more than any other champion in the franchise. So, let me take away from this, and if we take this as a whole, the theory goes even deeper, and in fact goes into the idea that Alder's ancestor wasn't the legendary hero. Alder is the legendary hero. Either that, or the guy had some stronger genes than any other of our ancestors within Legends Arceus. Strong enough to make a guy in the modern age who has been around Pokeballs and storage systems for assumedly his entire adult life have no understanding of how this basic tech works, which is supposed to be incredibly easy with how other elderly individuals have learned to use it. Let's take a look at his team as well, because while his Pokemon may not live forever, there may be hints to this connection. Axelgor and Escavalier relate to each other and originate here in Unova. Buffalance, if we relate it back to American Bison, is a much older creature, lots of history there. Conkeldurr is also said to have been the one to teach humans how to create concrete. And then we have the 2 that interest me the most, Volcarona and Braviary. And that's not just because Volcarona is my favorite bug Pokemon. Volcarona is ancient, incredibly rare, and only ever found directly in one place, the ruins within the Desert Resort, which relates back to the legendary dragons of Unova. Also, side note, considering Volcarona will get rid of all the oxygen in a room and people were using it to replace the sun when it was gone due to a cataclysmic event, those people likely suffocated to death and became the Yamask that we see there. Dark. Anywho, yeah, Volcarona goes way back. Meanwhile, Braviary is the only direct tie to Hisui, considering that Hisui in Braviary was subjected to incredibly harsh environments and originally had the psychic typing added to it, or originally had the psychic typing. But as city life became a thing and it moved away from the Alabaster Icelands, just like Weirdeer, it no longer needed that power that it had and actually evolved in the traditional sense, losing it. And we know that there was a Hisui in Braviary related to the ancient hero as well, but the snag in our theory is that it was not quite on his team, though it would help us get the idea of him having more than just a traditional 6. No matter what, we know that they are, in the very least, related to each other. Alder has all those ideals and habits of a hero. He's confirmed to be the oldest champion to date, and he's just overall a bit of an interesting mystery all in all. One day, a Legends game will hopefully give us our answers and not just give us that random one image that looks a little too close like him. Ancient Kalos War, we kind of mentioned it earlier. War on the Moor of Icarus. The Swords of Justice come in, slap the humans across the face a couple of times, tell them not to mistreat Pokemon, stop their warring, and we're done cleaning up your messes. Keldeo pops out and is like, yo, I don't know where my parents are. And they're like, yo, we're gonna adopt you. Anywho, wait, you're a legendary Pokemon, but you have parents and we have no idea where they are? Yeah, fantastic. We're never gonna go into that whatsoever ever again. Maybe you'll go off and try to find them once you gain the super sword on your head. We're moving on. What occurred between Brock and Ivy? In Pokeball Peril, Ash and his friends found Professor Ivy and obtained the GS Ball. Later in the episode, Professor Ivy and Raticate got sent to the Pokemon Center because they got in the way of a Vileplume scattering pollen. During these events, Brock fell in love with her and decided to stay with the professor as her assistant. Brock continued to stay with her during Ash's Orange League adventure until a tense situation episode where Ash and Misty met Brock at Ash's home in Pallet Town. Not only did they part on mysterious terms, but Brock's time spent at her lab had never been fully explained. Whatever happened, speaking Professor Ivy's name around Brock caused him to curl up into a ball and simply state, "Don't mention that name." The events that caused Brock to be traumatized have been the subject of fan speculation. To break down Professor Ivy and get an idea of her character, her field of research is in regional differences in Pokemon physiology. Her report on Pokemon adaptive variation as a function of regional distribution, which basically means the more varied they are in their location from each other, the more they have physically changed, makes sense, was published in the Pokemon Researchers Monthly magazine. She is considered to be very attractive, but it is noted that her looks do not negate her achievements as a Pokemon researcher. She and Professor Oak are good friends. In other words, it would not be very surprising if Brock was no better than every person who wants the strong goth GF, but can't handle a strong independent woman. He's a young. I just called Brock young. How old is he? Oh God, he was 15 at his debut. I'm gonna turn it to dust. Ugh. Anywho, I'm gonna double down. He was interested. But unlike every other single time where he swoons and flirts with a Nurse Joy or Police Jenny, Officer Jenny, oh my goodness, that was sacrilege. He was truly interested in Professor Ivy here. And when she finally rejects him, he is actually hurt for the first time. He may have truly became invested in Ivy, and at no fault to her, she did not reciprocate those feelings, resulting in what was likely his first true heartbreak. He would have been the right age for him to have his first heartbreak after all, and I'm pretty sure she's a lot older than him, so that would have been a very inappropriate relationship. Anime Isorola's Mimikyu. So Isorola's Mimikyu is our shiny Mimikyu. Every shiny has an explanation, and yes, I'm very tempted to cover a video on that as well. But with Isorola's, it's mostly gray in color with one small yellow patch and a flower on the ear, but it goes much further than that. Isorola, being the trial captain of Sun and Moon games, uses ghost-type Pokemon that fit with her haunted aesthetic. She's closely associated with Mimikyu, as it is the totem Pokemon for her challenge. The anime decided to take things a step further by giving her a very special Mimikyu named Mimikins. Mimikins has the appearance of a shiny Mimikyu, which has a desaturated color palette, the floral decoration pinned to its decoy head as well. Shinies in the anime are rare enough, but what really makes Mimikins special is the fact that it is a ghost. Not just a ghost type, but literally the ghost of a deceased Mimikyu. Being dead means that Mimikins can't attack or participate in battle, but it's also no longer bound by gravity, allowing it to hover and fly around. So, if you ever needed a strong confirmation that ghost types aren't just ghosts, there you go. Also, I made an entire video explaining every ghost type Pokemon, so there's that too. But yeah, a dead ghost Pokemon that's now a ghost of a dead Pokemon that was a ghost. It gets really messy, of course, and it still wears the disguise, so apparently it still has a little bit of a self-conscious even in the afterlife, and it could probably still kill us if we saw its true form as a ghost. Go figure. Fantina's home region. She speaks with a French accent in the English version, then speaks English in the Japanese and French versions of the game. Ultimately, the idea is that, sure, she's supposed to be French, by all means, but even with Kalos out, we never got full-on confirmation. And if you didn't know, because I didn't, French is spoken commonly in 29 different countries. So there are easily 28 other locations for Fantina to be from, possibly more, considering once again, New York was turned into an entire region. A lot of stretching room to have there. Drasna is from Celestic Town. In Pokemon X and Y, Drasna appears as an Elite Four trainer of Kalos. Her grandparents are from Sinnoh Celestic Town and taught her about the region's mythology surrounding Dialga and Palkia, which inspired her to train Dragon-type Pokemon. In Pokemon Masters EX, it is revealed that Drasna considers Pokemon battles to be a form of play. Drasna has a friendly, cheerful personality, but often shows a relaxed composure which hints at her strength that knows no bounds. I mean, sure, this theory holds water in the end, considering her grandparents are from Celestic Town already. It's basically just unconfirmed info at this point, since her original home is unknown. Maybe she's even from the Dragon Village specifically, just like Drayden and Iris in Unova. It's not impossible. Agatha and Bertha are related. The theory that Agatha and Bertha are related, often presented as sisters, is a popular fan speculation in the Pokemon world, fueled by their similar appearances, names, and roles as Elite Four members, as well as a shared ancestor in Pokemon Legends Arceus, which, a character named Charm, is revealed to be an ancestor of both Agatha and Bertha, as she uses both a Gengar, Agatha's signature Pokemon, and a Rhydon, Bertha's signature Pokemon. So for years, you grow up, you see these two individuals, and when you're little, you probably thought they were the same person, forgetting that they do in fact have different names, and they do look a little different, even though they look very similar. Because, after all, it's no big deal if someone changes their teams over the course of a couple years, or hey, I might have misremembered what they looked like and what happened, but we do know they are distinctly different, and luckily, Legends Arceus helps indirectly confirm this information. Those genes are strong in those ancestor timelines and families, and I cannot say it enough. Heck, even Volkner's ancestor, the Ginkgo Guild leader, has the same unmotivated attitude, so it just goes deeper than looks. It goes full on into emotions and mentality. They could be sisters. They could be distant cousins. Those genes go a long way in the end for over hundreds of years for that matter. So, you know, they're related, but we don't really know how. Fused Legendary Beasts and Sword Masters. This is actually what we talked about earlier with the Legendary Beasts Imagined Creature and the Swords of Justice Imagined Creature within Pokemon Scarlet and Violet books. It is very strange that these creatures could be quote-unquote imagined only for 6 entire creatures or Pokemon to pop out of the ether and have the cheese grater separated traits that were sketched out. Honestly, Paradox Pokemon have been some of the most confusing Pokemon introduced to the Pokemon franchise until you sit down and actually read up on them. I, personally, refuse to just believe that they are actually fully imagined drawings. They were seen somewhere as a single beast in some timeline, in some universe. Maybe one could argue Heath saw them in the crystals of Terrapagos, and because the crystals distort images, maybe he really did only see parts of each creature and figured they had to be one singular beast based on the image distortions. Genuinely a toss-up. I know my feelings on the imaginary, all the Paradox Pokemon being imaginary, but it's kind of a toss-up, really, with this one specifically, and doesn't interest me too much considering what we talked about earlier, unless we know for sure somehow Heath didn't already see the disjointed parts of the creature and just drew them together. Volo is immortal. The Volo is immortal theory comes from Volo's claim that he is willing to even take centuries to locate and conquer Arceus, and his goal to subjugate Arceus in order to create a peaceful new world. I mean, that's just the man's spouting off. Look into those eyes and tell me there is a shred of sanity there. There isn't. If you said there is, then I wish you the best of luck in your next relationship. What's more fun, though, is that Volo is aware of his bloodline. He is aware of the day that one day Arceus will be met by someone of his own blood, and with his own understanding that this spirit does exist within the world of Pokemon, thanks to all the assumed time travel he likely completed and all the ghost Pokemon, he may be speaking about Cynthia. By having Cynthia reach Arceus, he could see it as success for himself and the Celestica people, a destined fate, as he would state. He could never see Arceus itself at this point due to his loss, and Arceus was refusing to reveal itself to Volo, which is why they needed Giratina to collect the plates, harness the power of Arceus, call it with the Celestica flutes, and together fight against God. Volo is literally any other JRPG protagonist, and it would be really fun to see an entire game where we play as Volo and actually succeed in confronting God for banishing Giratina, who is only serving to protect what he was born to govern over, all while Dog and Palkia decided that they would have fun clashing and ruining the universe as we know it. I will close out this idea that as, I want you to imagine Cynthia staring at Arceus in the Platinum event as we meet her there. The long-awaited spirit of Volo is with her, smiling, potentially even calmed and wizened by age, waiting hundreds of years for this moment, and finally gets ready to depart into the afterlife. At least assuming he doesn't have a ghost aneurysm looking at Don or Lucas, who looks exactly like Rei and Akari, and he dies and goes to super heaven or whatever. Sinjoh region location. From Reddit user Darkblade43_563, Sinjoh is a theoretical region that is the buffer zone between Sinnoh and Johto. It was only mentioned in Heart Gold Soul Silver during an event where you teleport to the Sinjoh ruins with an event Arceus and get to witness it create an egg for you to keep that hatches into your choice of Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina. However, if you go back and read the old verses in Legends Arceus, verse 12 has a really surprising verse that merits note. Wintry, austere, brimming with strange power, certainly the land of Hisui, bears some resemblance to Sinjoh. This means that not only is Sinjoh confirmed to be an actual region and not just a temple, but it seems to bear some resemblance to Hisui, which makes sense since Sinjoh is theoretically between Sinnoh, modern-day Hisui, and Johto. Now, I am not entirely sure that it is an entirely different region. I would argue that Sinjoh is a buffer region, though not in the country sense, rather a section of land. Maybe something that is undiscovered by anybody else other than the Celestica people. Sacred land, if you would. It would be a border between the lands of Sinnoh and Johto, which are geographically connected. Think like a Venn diagram, but you don't have the middle part. The only real physical understanding we can get is through looking at the Sinjoh ruins, which are technically outside of the bounds of both Johto and Sinnoh. The Sinnoh ruins are outside of the range of the map, and therefore are not part of the regions of Kanto or Johto. It is unknown where exactly they are in relation to Sinnoh and Mount Coronet. The only hint to their location is the Pokegear's map of Johto, pointing far north of Blackthorn City and northeast of the Lake of Rage. They can be visited by way of a mysterious entry point in the ruins of Alf, created by the Unown and Arceus. I would love for this to be explored further through archaeological means. After all, this could help us explore the history of the Celestica people further, and I'll have to include this in the video on them when I eventually make it. XY power plant's locked doors. Are you telling me I'm not crazy and impatient that there really was no way to get into those doors? Okay. There were theories circulating about this place when Volcanion was first leaked, stating how with its relation to steam, the steam coming out of that area to ensure no overheating was done, and knowing the power plant is powered by heat, so water, splash, steam, heat, blah blah blah, it would have made sense to think of our Volcanion or how it would or could have been down there. But we know so little about Volcanion, and this place was not given to be the source of its creation or home. The theory did go even further, according to a number of people, going as far to say that the 3 secret legendaries of the game were being housed, or at least locked up by Team Flare once an original unknown plan had failed. Of course, we could chalk it up as an irrelevant location that wasn't programmed to be fully part of the game, but it sits in such an obvious spot that it, of course, would attract the attention of a lot of people. In the end, it's something that will never get any answers and will likely be something that the Pokemon Company will let sit in the past. Could just simply be another GS Ball situation. Grand Oak is related to Professor Oak. Grand Oak, Dai Okaido, is a Pokemon researcher and developer of Pokemon Home. Despite his name appearance and theme music all resembling those of Professor Oak, the exact relationship between the two characters is unknown. Grand Oak greets the player when they first start either version of Pokemon Home and asks for the player's assistance in completing a comprehensive national Pokedex. In the mobile version, he also gives the player a hidden ability Kanto first starter Pokemon to bring into a compatible game. In the mobile version, since the addition of shiny Pokemon given as rewards for completing the regional dex for a certain game, Grand Oak appears again to congratulate the player upon completion of a regional Pokedex. He has the same values and similar enough same speech pattern to Professor Oak. Looks the same, except with whiter, longer hair that drapes over his chest, and then those futuristic shades that block his eyes and represent the trading system within the game. There's so little information here that we could just have plenty of fun with this, especially as I couldn't find anything stating that they are in fact 2 different people. So who knows? Maybe, after all his traveling, considering his ultimate goal was to complete the Pokédex in the first 2 generations, maybe this version of Oak is the one that decided to keep a perfect and up-to-date proper Pokédex of the world. An Oak that would continue traveling, meeting new people and trainers studying new Pokemon firsthand all until his final days. I could see it, especially as he gets older and older, as we have another character who has excessively long hair in the same style in old age as we look at AZ himself. Maybe Oak got a bit of that immortality juice somehow, or this Grand Oak is a digitized personality. Again, the possibilities are endless. Nanu and Giovanni's past. This is an anime-only occurrence, but Nanu debuted in Why Not Give Me a Z-Ring sometime, where Team Rocket hoped to get a Z-Ring from him at the recommendation of Giovanni. However, he initially refused to give one to them, even claiming that the Island Kahuna was away at the time. In Tough Guy Trials, Nanu received a phone call from Giovanni, who was surprised to learn Nanu had become both a police officer and an Island Kahuna. He asked Nanu to tell him about the Pokemon the people of Alola call the Blinding One, but the call was interrupted by the arrival of Ash, who came to challenge Nanu in the Grand Trial. We have some very interesting story parallels going on here, especially if we consider there are implications that Nanu was once associated with a criminal organization in his past. Giovanni and Nanu both love their Persians. Giovanni used to be a gym leader, while Nanu is a child captain. Giovanni leads his criminal organization, while Nanu leads the Alola police force, and then their personalities are opposite to each other. So, I suppose they are parallels and foils to each other if we want to be technical. So, Nanu may have been part of a criminal organization, cleaned up, became part of the international police, quit 10 years ago, prior to the current events of the main story of Pokemon Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, or Sun and Moon, and is now a child captain within Alola. Lots of room to have interacted with Giovanni, especially as Nanu was Looker's superior for some time before he had left the international police. We could make the assumption that Nanu may have been under Giovanni's hand at some point. When we look at the Rainbow Rocket episode, nobody has a clue who Team Rocket are in the first place, or at least nobody that we talked to. Originally, this could mean that they just didn't succeed in their plan of ruling over the world, which is no duh, but there's more to this. You don't just forget the criminal organizations that were major threats that multiple champions involved themselves with in order to take down, and when we look at champions, Red and Blue in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, we see they have clearly grown up, potentially even grown up 10 years in age. I mean, look at the mug on Red, and not only he, but Blue are both bosses of the battle tree. With this info, we could conclude that well over 10 years ago, before the fall of Team Rocket, Nanu was potentially a low-level grunt that turned heel within Team Rocket. He never gave up the underhanded tactics, though, as in fact, in real life, there are many criminals or instances of individuals who were originally incredibly skilled criminals that turned a new leaf and were able to help officials improve security and cybersecurity through their tactics. Nanu, being a dark-type leader, the underhanded typing essentially, could be using those skills to teach others, to look in areas that otherwise wouldn't be looked into and come out on top. He could then be on the hunt for the missing Giovanni, or at least wondering where he did go, since even his own subordinate, Looker, couldn't figure out where Giovanni went. And now, here's Giovanni, after all this time, knowing Nanu, keeping tabs on him and his life, expressing surprise over Nanu's position as a captain of trials and police. I love it! I'm a big fan of this one. I already love Nanu's character, so adding in some subtle details behind it all, giving him a past that he had left behind that, you know, who knows what he did in his younger age before the international police. I'm a big fan of this theory, and I would only hope to see more of this in the future. Victini is based on the atom bomb. This one is old. I mean old. And I remember hearing about it. This is all because of the infinite energy that Victini creates within it, while also having its name based on the words victory and tiny. So people thought this could relate back to the Little Boy bomb, one of the 2 atomic bombs dropped on Japan in World War II. In the end, though, we have New York, the Big Apple, and our Victini here representing how apples can be cut for children to visually represent rabbits, all while holding up the big old V for victory symbol, and might be a relation to Nike, the goddess of victory. We can move on. Woman's secret. yes, there is a swimmer that asks, where did I keep those Pokeballs? While wearing a single-piece swimsuit. Her only other line is, woman's secret, so either she had Pokeboobs or she had a very uncomfortable experience that I am not going to expound upon. You can use your imagination, and we're on to Professor Oak was a champion. This I can get behind without a thought or extra thought in my mind. In fact, I can guarantee he had the opportunity or did become a champion, and even after winning, decided he didn't want to hold the throne down. How do I know this? When we look at the Pokemon Adventures manga for starters, we know that Oak directly states, I've already won myself a championship. I don't need this. After defeating Green in the tournaments and bowing out to see Red and Blue fight for the title. In fact, we even see him up against Agatha, who he does have a past with. But of course, you know I can't just stop there because this is too much fun. Agatha and Oak did have a past as growing trainers. They battled each other, were planning on going for their championship, defeating the Elite Four, gym leaders, so on and so forth, right? Eventually, Oak starts getting really interested in the differences between Pokemon, the understanding and study of them, and making notes on them. Eventually telling Agatha, hey, I'm gonna go do this thing called a Pokedex. It's just what I want to call it. I want to study them, and I want documentation of them. I want to be able to tell other trainers and help other trainers on their journey, not just become the champion. Now, Agatha does get hurt by this because they were best friends. They were supposed to be the Red and Blue of their generation. They were supposed to be champions, and they were the motivations for each other. Many years later, as Oak grows up, and Agatha does as well, they grow old in age, they're still friends, they make fun of each other, and they both have reconciled over that hurt and that pain that they had in their past, as Agatha is now an Elite Four member, and Oak is also a skilled trainer still, but is a professor that helps new and upcoming trainers on their journeys. And you know what? I want Oak's journey. The big man himself, the one who has nurtured so many individuals into loving this franchise. Give me his story animated, not just Sam. I want his whole story. I want to see the many people and Pokemon he got close to, his time as a trainer, and his journey with Agatha. Give me it all. I would love it, and I'm sure many others would too. Mewtwo's birth. In Red and Blue, the Cinnabar Mansion diaries state that Mewtwo was given birth to by Mew. Some people hold this translation to be rather literal, making it up for speculation, but it seems to simply imply instead of the direct meaning of birth, it is, of course, just the flowery language that scientists may use. And in the first Pokemon film, the story tells that it was in fact a DNA splicing using Mew's eyelash as a source for DNA. To cover my bases, though, I even decided to dig into the uncut story of Mewtwo's origin, and that was a depressing trip. Basically, we get clones derived from DNA in the instances of Mewtwo from Mew, but we also get Amber in our Kanto starters that are cloned as well. Can you guess their names? Amber 2, Bulbasaur 2, Squirtle 2, and Charmander 2, written exactly how Mewtwo would be written in their name. And while their names are goofy, we get something sad that I wasn't ready for, so time for me to share the ending of the short with you and make you depressed with me. Amber 2 shows Mewtwo and the rest of the clones, Charmander 2, Squirtle 2, and Bulbasaur 2, a memory where she used to live and shows him elements of life, wind, sun, rain, and times of the day. This is done telepathically, by the way. Mewtwo asks Amber 2 if the moon is the sun and is told the moon is there to keep people from being afraid of the dark. And during their time before this, Amber even told Mewtwo she was unaware of anybody else who could, that wasn't a human, use telepathic powers. Mewtwo asks, well, am I human or Pokemon? And she says, don't worry yourself with that. It's irrelevant. And after sharing this memory, the clones slowly fade away, which the scientists lament as another failure. Inside Amber 2's Remember place, Mewtwo looks around for the other clones and asks Amber 2 where they had gone. However, Amber 2 begins to fade away, which one of the scientists notes quietly. Fuji watches solemnly as the energy pulse in the tank fades away. Mewtwo, worried, asks Amber 2 what is happening, to which she replies that it feels like it's time to say goodbye. Mewtwo begins to cry at the loss of his friend, and Amber 2 assures him that it will be alright and thanks him for caring about her. She tells him he will live and that life is wonderful. However, Mewtwo calls out for Amber 2 in sadness and fear, which begins to manifest as a psychic emission and spike in brain activity. As alarm klaxons blare, Fuji orders his assistants to stabilize Mewtwo's powers by administering a memory-wiping serum. The serum almost fails to take effect, but gradually, Mewtwo calms down and falls asleep. The team is relieved, and while Dr. Fuji is glad Mewtwo survived, he is outraged that his daughter is gone forever. Mewtwo slowly matures, and in its sleep, it states that it feels like it has been asleep for what seems like forever. It still has slight memories of Amber and ponders over her last words. Mewtwo Strikes Back, the movie, continues from this point. So yeah, that one hurts. Ooh, that one hurts. And it's that, like, it's one of those things where it's like, it shouldn't hurt. Yeah, you know, just reading that shouldn't hurt. But at the same time, I have younger sisters. And I'm very prone to imagining, like, when I hear a little girl in a story and there's no visuals, I often imagine my younger sisters. And if they get hurt, or I imagine that they have similar personalities or anything along those lines, it hits me in a soft spot. So I wasn't expecting that to make me tear up a little bit, but it did. Because, gosh, that is a genuine human interaction and relation that's happening there, and we love Mewtwo. Mewtwo's been around for so long, and to learn that it's even more tragic than what we already know makes it hurt that much more. It's just pain, and makes us understand Mewtwo. Oh gosh, I don't want to say it was right in its destruction because Mewtwo killed a lot of people, but we can understand where that emotion is derived from, beginning to end. Misty has a crush on Ash. I'm not gonna psychoanalyze every single relationship that is romantic between characters. We're going on to the 6th time gear. Oh boy, we're getting into Mystery Dungeon. Thanks to Danielle and other commenters on the Reddit, as I can share the following and didn't have to go through excessive hours upon hours of reading to get this information and could just double check it. In Explorers of Sky, you can see that Temporal Spire has 5 indents in the spot where the time gears needed to go in order to stop Temporal Tower from collapsing. You end up bringing exactly the 5 time gears from the continent and putting them in respective place. These 5 time gears originate from these locations: Fogbound Lake, Underground Lake, Crystal Lake, oh gosh, don't never put a camp there, please, Limestone Cavern, and Tree Shroud Forest. However, in the 3rd chapter of the main story, the partner tells the protagonist of a time gear hidden inside a volcano, accompanied with a visual. Furthermore, this visual also happens to be the title screen for Explorers of Darkness. While it could simply be a false rumor the partner has picked up, the deliberate visual on the screen makes them believe otherwise. This would mean that there's actually 6 time gears. What is interesting about this is not that only is there a missing indent in the Temporal Spire, then, but you can also make connections that the location of the time gear could in fact be Dark Crater Pit, Darkrai's hiding place, which shares a lot of visual similarities with the display of the 6th time gear. Furthermore, as the northwest of the world was unreached by any of the story characters until post-game, it can't be fully assured whether or not time had stopped on the volcanic region of the map until Temporal Tower was saved. Speaking still from their post, a personal theory of mine, to also approach the mystery of why Darkrai was time warping, or has time warping properties in this game, would be that after Jirachi created Darkrai to fulfill Bidoof's wish, it ended up in Dark Crater, where it destroyed/harnessed the power of the time gear to gain time-traveling properties and to stop time on the whole island. This would also explain as to how Darkrai could reach the hidden land or the spatial rift and how it creates dimensional holes. Finally, after Darkrai sabotaged Temporal Tower, Dialga stamped out the indents on Temporal Spire for the remaining time gears as he slowly descended into madness, banking on the relic fragment's chosen one to gather the time gears and save the tower. After succeeding, time reverts back to normal globally, including the volcanic region. When Grovyle leaves a letter at Sharpedo Bluff for the player and partner, he says he acquired the 5 necessary time gears. That phrasing leaves open the possibility that there is at least one more time gear, but only 5 are needed to prevent Temporal Tower's collapse. We don't even know if the 5th gear Grovyle took is the one from the Limestone Cavern, or if it exists, the one in the volcano. They've also seen another theory that Darkrai and maybe also Cresselia were originally guardians of time gears like Azelf, Uxie, and Vesprit were, with Darkrai guarding the volcano. And because I was unaware of the entire Bidoof thing, let's cover that for anyone who doesn't know Mystery Dungeon and the theory behind what happened and why Darkrai, an unheard of Pokemon before this game, was suddenly here. Bidoof, wishing upon Jirachi, adapts his previous wish and now asks for friends instead, which Jirachi grants. Later, he's seen looking at Protag and partner happily since those became his friends. Considering Jirachi did grant his wish, it must have set up a cascade of events leading up to Bidoof meeting the two. Since the partner never had the courage to join the guild on his own, Jirachi orchestrated them meeting the Protag, who in turn only exists because of the Dark Future, which only exists because of Darkrai. Additionally, it was Darkrai who even caused the accident during time travel, causing the Protag to end up on the beach. Others interpret that Jirachi merely transformed the protagonist into a Pokemon or made them end up on the beach specifically, considering that Darkrai came out of thin air since nobody had ever heard of him before until post-game, and had never acted out on one of his evil schemes before until Bidoof made his wish. So, yeah, huge mess of stuff there, but I'm all for the idea that there could be more time gears based on these arguments. I'm sorry, I love Dogapalki and Giratina, but they are not the most sound of mine. Even when they are sane, they cause immense destruction and everything in other games. I would not be surprised if there were more time gears than necessary, or even that time is not completely stable anymore, leaving the world open to more explanation one day, as we have seen with many of the other Mystery Dungeon games. Gita is a villain. This is another one that was laid out before Terapagos' reveal. This was based on the idea that Gita's ace Pokemon, Glimmora, is native to Area 0, a mysterious and dangerous region, and its Pokedex entry mentions Terastal that she keeps hinting towards as some sort of world that she wants, potentially being related to Area 0. In addition, Glimmora, you really don't want to inhale anything around it, as you will get poisoned and basically die, oversimplifying it there. The flooring in the grand entrance of the Champions area also mirrors the hexagonal pattern found in Area 0, and her overall unusual team, though nothing was ever truly concrete and nothing fell from it. But you know what? Allow me to share with you the biggest red herring I have probably ever seen in Pokemon. Briar. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, I literally have a video out there where I predicted exactly what was gonna happen in the DLC, and I almost nailed it to a T. From Kieran having to team up with him and deal with Terapagos and all this other stuff, right? And him losing control and blah, 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 blah. But I was 100% ready for Briar, with her eyes that look like Bramblegast, to have a Bramblegast or Bramblin on her team, because again, their eyes match with each other, color and all, and yet, you know, maybe she would fight against us, having taken control of the new legendary Pokemon within the DLC, and then we'd get to team up with Kieran against her, making Kieran realize, like, hey, you messed up. We get it. We're friends now. We're amigos. Let's do this, dude. You're the introvert. I'm the extrovert. I'm adopting you. Kieran might be one of my favorite characters, despite his, you know, Venom suit Spider-Man attitude that he ends up having and his overall rage. Poor kid. Overall, though, I will say, though, like, she was the biggest red herring. With all of her attitude and everything that she wanted, Briar was destined to be evil. And yet she was just a person that's like, I'm gonna push this chess piece forward and oh, I actually pressed a domino. Oh, look at it go. Look at that Goldberg machine just go off. Oh, and they spilled coffee on my laptop. Fantastic, thanks. Anywho, I'm not gonna take responsibility for any of this. This was you guys. I love it and I hate it all at the same time because I was so ready to go up against Briar. I was so ready. Biggest red herring. I'm ready to move on. I'm a little angry about it. Muna planned since Generation 1. There was an NPC back in Gen 1 saying how she loves chunky Pokemon and that they should have a pink one with floral patterns on it. So of course that would spark the idea that Muna may have been planned since the beginning. There are plenty of chunky Pokemon out there. Drowsy is one of them, which is actually known to be biologically related to Muna for that matter. As much as I would love for this to be, something that was planned since the beginning, we have seen plenty of beta Pokemon and scrapped plans. And I wouldn't be surprised if the creators had randomly remembered this when creating Gen 5 and then jumped on it. Paradox that attacked Arven. During his initial trip into Area 0, Arven's Mabastiff was gravely wounded by one of the Paradox Pokemon, and he claims it happened in between Research Stations 1 and 2. Our Paradox Pokemon can be a little quirky sometimes, but there are only a few that are outwardly incredibly aggressive, while also being Pokemon that Arven could have interacted with, whether that be in the story or before it. What helps us is there are a number of Paradox Pokemon that Arven interact with in the main story as we fight them alongside him in order to obtain Herba Mystica, but he never reacts to them in a fearful manner or anything. Instead, he gears up and is ready to fight with the same amount of trepidation between them all. What Pokemon does that leave us with then? Roaring Moon, Iron Valiant, or the other 6 Pokemon that were added in the DLC? I would dare bet, of them all, that it would simply be between Moon and Valiant, leaning more towards Roaring Moon. When we look at information regarding them, we get for Iron Valiant. An unproven theory claims that it is a robot built as the product of a mad scientist's efforts to create the most powerful psychic Pokemon, even though it's not a psychic type. According to eyewitnesses, Iron Valiant is similar in appearance to both Gardevoir and Gallade. It is also said to be a cruel Pokemon, willing to take its shining blade and cut down anyone confronting it without hesitation. Meanwhile, with Roaring Moon, according to an article from an April issue of Ecology magazine, Roaring Moon is named after a similarly described being in the Scarlet Book. The article says it looks similar to Salamence that has undergone a certain phenomenon that occurs elsewhere in the world, but it's unclear if there is any connection. Basically, that phenomenon would be Mega Evolution. It said that Roaring Moon scatters feathers as it flies around at high speeds seeking prey. It's thought to be more savage than Salamence, and that it should be avoided at all costs. So, sure, pick your universe, Scarlet or Violet, and you have your answers. On one hand, Arven may have encountered an Iron Valiant, thought it was a friend, and with it being a fairy fighting type, a disgusting counter against Mabastiff as a dark type Pokemon, we could grow to understand where the severe injury would have come from. Meanwhile, with Roaring Moon, it's just incredibly fast and aggressive. It is very savage. It's hard to tell how the two would have been able to escape, but maybe the big boofer managed to injure the Paradox Pokemon just enough so that way they could escape. But before we do move on, I have to admit, as I often do, Arven annoyed me a bit at first, and I had fun giving him the snooty prep voice, very Zarbon-like, but as the story went on, I loved his tale more and more. And let it be known that while these games may have mechanically not been the best, in my opinion, the story was great. Nothing mind-blowing, but the story, especially Arven's, to me, hit me in a soft spot and was worthwhile. Aster. If you don't know who Aster is actually the original lore keeper of the Draconids before our lore keeper Zinnia took place. So the whole story here really only occurs within the Pokemon Adventures manga, otherwise we just get hints in the anime to the devastation that occurs. She, being Aster, was very close with Rayquaza, being the actual chosen lore keeper, being able to tame Rayquaza, speak to him, everything, or them, whatever. And that was until the Devon Corporation came up, rolled up their wheels, and said, hey, we're taking Rayquaza, and showed their copy of the ultimate weapon in Tiny Rover form. She goes, and then they say, They then blast Rayquaza. She dies in the action, which we don't get to see, and Rayquaza is captured for further investigation and or understanding of how the phenomena Mega Evolution occurs, thanks to not only the Devon Corporation, but also the Pokemon League. That is when Zinnia comes up, sees her dead best friend, takes her cape in a very Bardock from freaking Dragon Ball Z-esque fashion, ties it around her, and does everything she can to try and be the next lore keeper. Unfortunately for her, her life is a tortured one, where Rayquaza does not actually accept her as a lore keeper, no matter how hard she tries, even attacking her at one point. And it is just sad. And the only hint we really get of Aster anywhere else is simply because she has a Wishmer named Aster with the Draconids. That one I've had memorized within my brain, mainly because it's probably one of my favorite dark stories of Pokemon. Just poor Zinnia, a character that I never cared for because I never played Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, just having the beautiful moments in Pokemon The Wish and finding out that despite her situation, despite the trouble she goes through, despite the pain and rejection she constantly gets, she still does everything she can to be the best person she can be and make a positive difference. And I respect that, making her, I'd say, probably within my top 10 characters within the Pokemon world. Hassel is from Johto. Hassel is a descendant of a long line of dragon-type trainers in an unnamed faraway region. He ran away from home as a youth to pursue a dream of making music, before becoming a member of the Elite Four in the Paldea region, as well as an art instructor at the academy. Hassel is shown to be friendly, but very emotional, as he bursts into tears of joy when defeated by the player. He is an old friend of gym leader Brashius of Artisan. During his Bond story, a dragon tamer arrives at the academy to get Hassel back home, claiming his father, the head of the family, is feeling ill and Hassel should be taking his place as the head of the family. Through interactions with the player, Hassel gains the confidence to confront the dragon tamer, realizing her words about his father's deteriorating health were lies, in another attempt to get him to come home and swearing to stay at the academy to teach. Go Hassel, stick it to them. We could look at the fact that he's pulling off that classic cape, very much like Claire and Lance do. They both have strong eyebrows, and honestly, his hair is just close enough to Claire's that it makes me, link them together a little bit. He just has a shorter ponytail and longer locks in the front that still arc up just a bit like hers do. What muddies the waters a bit, though, is that Hassel does use a Dragonite in the Academy Ace tournament, but it is still not his ace. And he has a Haxorus, which is also not his ace, which is unrelated to our, Lance and Claire here, but at the same time, I wanted to look at Unova as a potential, home base of him being the Dragon Village, but I doubt that too. He does have a bit of a Shakespearean accent, as others have described it. I always thought he was German accent, and that leads us towards that Old English, which matches the whole dragon style that we have going on here, which Galar maybe, but I doubt that too. Nobody else does that accent, and it comes out stronger when he gets emotional, I feel, so it's a natural accent. To me, that takes away the idea of him being from Johto, despite the loose similarities. I would dare to bet that we have yet to find out where he is from, and we will one day in the distant future. Cosmog Linar Ultra Beasts. We've basically already covered this in a portion earlier. Cosmog are from an alternate universe. We do have Solgaleo and Lunala being from Ultra Space and being common Pokemon in Ultra Space for that matter. And on top of all that, they do have their cries, which I will play now. That sound very much like an Ultra Beast cry, as I will also play that now. In terms of that high-pitched, frequency that is found in all the Ultra Beast cries. Now, with them, there's a ton of arguments. Are Ultra Beast Pokemon? Are they not? Regular Pokeballs can work on them, but it is said that the Pokeballs have a hard time finding the genetic sequences of DNA within the Ultra Beasts of the Pokemon DNA that they're basically looking for in order to capture them. So that's why you have to use the Beast Balls in order to capture them instead. So arguably, they're Pokemon and they're Ultra Beasts. That's why they're in the Pokedex by all means. So, I don't know. You take it with what you will. I'm moving on. Detective Pikachu canon. Yes, Pokemon Detective Pikachu is considered canon to the Pokemon anime and the wider Pokemon universe, as it takes place within the same world and has references to established elements like Kanto, Johto, and Sinnoh. I'm not really sure what the mystery is here, but there are plenty of videos covering it, and if you made it this far, I think you know whether something is canon or not, there is always, once again, a grain of truth in everything. So, take the canon info, supplement it with non-canon info that we can bolster with proper canon information to create our theories, and that's basically what we do a lot of here anyway. Next, Koga tricks the player. I can't think of anything that this could be, even after a bunch of research. The closest I can think of is the idea that Koga was evil in the manga, so maybe he's still got ulterior motives in the games. I mean, yeah, he says he loves the despair and horror that poison-type Pokemon can inflict on others, so yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he had a couple screws loosed in the games and might have thought about attacking us directly. After all, his love doesn't limit him to inflicting that pain onto Pokemon. Sada and Turo are Arven's parents. This is already a proven theory. Moving on. Other palette trainers. This one goes back to the anime and when Ash got Pikachu. He was told that he was so late that all the other Pokemon were gone. All 3 of them. We know that Gary got one, being Squirtle. We never got confirmation, but we can use context clues and understand where Charmander at least came from. Originally belonging to a boastful trainer named Damien. However, in Charmander the Stray Pokemon, Damien grew tired of Charmander being weak, and so he abandoned him, leaving him on a rocky outcrop and telling him that he would come back later. Charmander's health deteriorated, but he was able to resist capture by Ash twice before explaining to Pikachu that he was waiting for Damien. Later, Ash met Damien and learned he never planned to return for Charmander. Outraged, but mostly concerned for Charmander, who is now stuck out in the rain, loyally awaiting Damien, Brock, Ash, and Misty, came in and rushed to his rescue, with Brock carrying him to the Pokemon Center, while Ash sheltered the little remaining Tailflame with his coat. And of course, he came back, lying how it was all to toughen up Charmander, Damien that is, only for Charmander to deflect the ball thrown at him and attack Damien, choosing to now be with Ash instead. Bulbasaur is an entirely different story, and I'm not entirely sure we can actually assume that the Bulbasaur that joined Ash from Melanie was originally one of Oak's. Ultimately, it was an open question that would never be answered as to where all the original starters came from or who those Pallet Town trainers were, and doesn't lead into much speculation, unfortunately, thanks to lack of details. Vesa was Spiritomb. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, Vesa introduces herself outside the player's quarters in Jubilife Village after Mission 7, the Frenzy of the Lord of the Woods, has been completed. She asks for the player's assistance in sealing away an unusual danger that has been spread across Hisui in the form of wisps, giving them an odd keystone to help collect the wisps. Vesa offers item rewards in exchange for gathering wisps. After 107 have been collected, she encourages the player to head to the Shrouded Ruins, where she reveals that 108 wisps are actually required to seal away the danger, with the last one secretly in her possession. Asking the player to turn away, she disappears, leaving behind the wisp. It is implied that she herself was one of the spirits imprisoned within Spiritomb, and that she needed to be brought back together with the rest of them, which we know that those are supposed to be evil spirits entombed within the odd keystone, so either that child is a war criminal, or she was never a child to begin with. Either way, she basically is proven to be one of the many spirits that make up Spiritomb, so yeah, she's Spiritomb. With that, we have covered 2 parts out of the 9 of this overly extensive iceberg. Some of the theories and mysteries lead themselves towards some very interesting ideas. Others have been proven in time, and others I'm just not going to bother with, and I don't even care about. But which one, I ask, got your brain chemicals working most? I originally had no interest in making an iceberg, but I've now learned a lot more about the series and have so many more questions, and we're only, again, 2/9 of the way through this. If you want to see the next parts sooner, spread the word of the channel and this video, help pump up those watch hours, and up next, while I wait for that to happen, to break things up a bit, I think I'm finally going to cover the complete ecology of Kalos. If you haven't seen my ecology videos yet, go check those out. They're some of my best work, and they tell you the food chains on each route, basically, and so much more. Like why Chameko eats Hoothoot or Quagsire eats Ekans and Arbok. But before we go, it's time to name off every single one of our members. If you'd like to see and hear your name on screen, you don't hear your name on screen, whatever, become a member for as little as $3 a month and support the channel that keeps you company through chores, playing games or helps you fall asleep. That's really awkward to say out loud. On to the members. Gods of Hope, Biggins, Heals for Life, and Vanny Lemon. Champions, Andrew Merch, Elizabeth Lovecout, Biggins, and Nias Costa. Knights of the Court, Dylan Perrine, Grumbo, Vanny Lemon, Double Plow, Annie Stone, Allen, Heals for Life, and Warren Emphil. Wanderers, Max Abri, Noisy Bones, Mysterious Militant, The Music Man, Pequan BBX, Chris Solace, Flame Ninja 30, Burnt Toast, Nathan Gressick, Trafo, Undi Ware, Aries Archives, Brighton Bishop, Fan, Yameetin Wolf, Toneko, Casey, Denzel, 1989, Blaine Cords, Rasha Snivy, Celtic Fox, Lucky Charms, Reverse Clock, Lydia Marie, Cat, Mushroom, JMT, Aramis, Katsy, Lay, Brash, Candicoot, Nori, Majin, TY, Danny the Dumbass 1, Hadiafa, and Abbas, Muhammad, I'm sorry, Ruthless Hauser, a Rogue, Spartan, Rubex, Swish, Cupcakes, Jiro, Xanthar, the Anime King, Dragon Gamer Z, Nathaniel, the Hunter, Nick, Trexy, and Ocean R, Foxer Wisp, Ninja Dad, Ace Visconti, Doma Arigato, Goofos, Big Rosie 45, Dylan, Zodiac Senpai, Horse of Amity, Dash John Gaming, Morm Sports Steady, Space Lozzy, Zach Arrowwood, Just There, Alive R360, The Chin 22, Jack of the Frost, Break, Orbit, Captain Alps Alba, North Cathan, Cool Guy 22, The Hawaiian Punch, Wet Like Watch, Tyrone Jones, Blue as Gecko, Tree Stump Out, Matthew Kennedy, T-Bag, I can't say that full name, Beware, Electro Lucario, Nit, Malachi, Zalakai, Sconner Shaw, Goat, Erini, Grant R, Travis Hinton, Hands, Dream, Adnan, Al Zaid, Elijah Tidwell, Dylan Porpin, Tripola, Redactivism, Oreo, That Darling Brad Drakovich, 200, Daniel Moody, Ireland, Japanese letters that I still can't read, Despair, Riley Pointer, Adrian Petrie, Reese Maru, Dat Boy, Bandit, Penguin Stage 29, Ash B, Harry, Pokepro, Mellow, Rexy Young, Illuminati, Salty Eggs, Wrecked Basher 45, Moth Knight, Castle Strong, Dark Scorpio, The Lawn, Kevlar Dadon, Miko No Money, Dia, Snake Sun, 520, Real Salu, Godsloth, Dank Gaming, Pisha, Mr. Diagonal, Yips, DJ Jester, Dry Bowser, JEV vocal covers, Ismail Ahmad, Sexy Bear, The Coolest Guy 22, Jefferson Thompson, Imagine Medico TH 73, Lick Grits, Buzzy, Ya Boy, Oven, Kavakava, The Great, A Random Person, Numal 20, or Moogle 2, Whistle, Addie C, Adam Sandler, Despoti Emperor, Jacob Square, DJ, Monk 23, Tyrai, Squidwater, Rysmith, Gamer Hag, Addy Kadabra, Bad Dragonite, King Pie, Just JM, Vanny Samaru, Star SMD, Hey Bale, Yeet, Mix, Micah 626 Gaming, Muse, Art World, Telumiel, Gwendolyn, Eatscanner072, Andrew Frost, Peak Anonymous, Summonslaw, Nook, Nguyen, Ian Ray, Big and C9, whatever this is, Corn on the Cob, Malachi, Burkhardt, Carlisle, and other ones, and thank you for being members! If you want to support the channel, also help us reach goals that do happen at 300, 400, and 500. If we hit 400 members in a single month, I will go ahead and allow you guys to choose a Pokemon for a tattoo. It'd be fantastic and terrible all the same. With that then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't do the thing I would do. I hope the green screen was great. I love the don't do the thing I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you and I'll see you next time. Bye!